Thank you for your patience. It appears that we're live streaming through our traditional means on eScribe and via the municipal website, but the YouTube function is challenging this evening, so our meeting is not being live streamed on YouTube right now, but it may be uploaded after the fact. So council colleagues, this is agenda meeting number 50 for this year, Tuesday, December 7th at 6:30 p.m. Before I begin, I want to acknowledge the very impressive efforts of our Kempfield under U18 Royals major rep team that fought hard in the Silver Stick this weekend. They accomplished an impressive silver, went into the finals with a lot of momentum and energy. So I want to congratulate the U18 Royals major rep team. I also want to acknowledge the excellent efforts of a variety of storm teams. They've also enjoyed some success of late on the competitive side in particular. So it's really great to see minor hockey coming back to life, and our own Kempfield 73s are on a really good run this season. So it's great to see the community embracing all of these opportunities to get out there. The other thing I'd like to acknowledge is that today a number of members, I think about 9 Youth Advisory Committee members, traveled to Ottawa with the support of Girls Inc. And Girls Inc. hosted about 21 young women who attended an event in Ottawa marking 100 years of the first female MP being elected, Agnes MacPhail, who grew up on a farm and has a very long history here in Ontario as an activist and an advocate. And on the occasion of 100 years of that historic moment, in 1921, there was a very large event in Ottawa. It continues as we speak with, I think, almost every member of Parliament attending a gala event, but we were so pleased to be able to host a number of young women who are members of our Youth Advisory Committee to partake in some of the day's activities and hear from a variety of speakers. So I want to thank those young women for stepping up and demonstrating an interest in celebrating such a historic moment. So with that in mind, I will look to council colleagues for the approval of the agenda. It's a bit of a full agenda this evening, colleagues, so take it for what you will, but I'll look for a mover and a seconder. Councillor Barclay and Deputy Mayor, thank you very much. I'll call the question on the agenda as presented. All in favor? Looking over the screens. Excellent. Thank you very much. With that, I'll ask for any disclosures of interest. Any disclosures of interest in regards to real or perceived financial benefit or loss arising from items on the agenda? Seeing none, it's my pleasure to move straight to delegations. We have a number this evening, and the first, of course, is the Old Town Kempfield BIA Budget 2022, and I see Mr. Johnson is here for that presentation. Mr. Johnson? Okay, and YouTube is working. For anyone who has an interest in live streaming over YouTube, YouTube is now cooperating, which is so nice of them. Okay, welcome.
Okay, here we go. Madam Mayor, Council, and very important members of staff, thank you for this opportunity to go through the 2022 draft budget for the Old Town Kempfield BIA. This is just a quick summary of the revenues that we'll be working with. Obviously, the commercial levy. It's been the same levy for the past 3 years. Obviously, with the pandemic being so troublesome for our business members over the past 2 years, we feel that now is not the time to increase the tax burden for our members. So we're keeping the levy the same. We anticipate some associate memberships. They come in the form of individual amounts of $300, so we're anticipating up to 3 new associate members coming on board. Event sponsorships revenue, that's becoming more and more prevalent the more and more events we do and the bigger events we do, so we wanted to add some of that revenue in there. And of course, grants and HST refund. Note number 2 is we don't actually have the amount for the HST refund yet. We won't have that till year end. But the $50,000 represents the municipal grant that we received recently. Expenditures, salaries, deductions, and benefits. All of those, it's fairly self-explanatory. That amount did increase significantly thanks to the municipal grant that we received of $50,000. Otherwise, normally that would be significantly less. Included in that also, what we're hoping to do is potentially reach out and get into the Canada's Summer Jobs program and maybe have a part-time summer student this year to help us out. Marketing and communications, third-party sponsorships, that's specifically every year, hopefully, well, I'm fairly certain we'll have a Kempfield Live coming up this year, and that's typically the amount we spend at a sponsorship for the Kempfield Live. Paid advertising, that's a fairly standard number for us as far as paid advertising. And the events number, $10,000, that's quite a bit more than we normally have. But seeing as how our salary is for our executive director is not coming directly out of our levy anymore, we had some more money to commit to events, so we definitely did that. Memberships, conferences, and subscriptions, fairly self-explanatory. Professional and consulting fees, if we needed to talk to a lawyer, that money's there and available, and supplies and printing. So, good news is we anticipate a little net surplus of $900, and that's pretty much it for the budget. Now, I did ahead of time send some information about the breakdown of our events and programming. If you want, I'm prepared to go through that with you, just to give you an idea of what's involved in that.
I think that would be helpful. Go ahead.
Okay. Okay. So February of 2022, we're anticipating a Kempfield Winter Carnival. It's being organized by Herb Cloutier of Jam Productions, and it's anticipated to be held in Curry Park with the potential for downtown business presence or participation in the event. The BIA may contribute through sharing event info with our BIA audience or contributing some volunteer organization time. We don't anticipate a financial commitment being necessary. April 2022, we're going to have our traditional Easter Bunny Hop. We've had to skip that the last couple of years, courtesy of COVID, but we fully anticipate being able to do that in 2022. It's a trick-or-treat style activity with other small activities included like scavenger hunts, obviously in an Easter theme. We anticipate spending about $500 on that event. May 21, 2022, the most important event ever in the history of North Grenville and Kempfield, the Kempfield Busker Fest. It's a large scale, we're calling it large scale, full day event hosted on Prescott Street with a variety of professional and local performers. There will also be a ticketed and licensed concert in the evening in Riverside Park, and currently the event has its own budget and there's no anticipated further financial commitment necessary from the BIA. June 2022, we'll be having a volunteer appreciation event like we did this year. It's primarily organized to thank our many volunteers and partners who contribute to the BIA. The financial commitment is $600 to that. July 1st, Canada Day. We're hoping to have one actually in person and outdoors this year. It's organized by the Kempfield District Community Association, and we feel it's an opportunity for BIA businesses to benefit from the participation in the event. And we are anticipating contributing volunteers and marketing support and a financial commitment of $500 for that. July 21st to the 24th of 2022, Kempfield Live Music Festival, hosted at the Kempfield campus. Previously, we've been a sponsor in exchange for a pair of VIP passes, which we've used for promotional draws and other purposes. BIA has also created a discount to encourage festival goers to visit our downtown Kempfield and BIA members and encourage them to spend money at local participating businesses. The anticipated financial commitment there is $1,500. August and September of 2022, we're looking at hosting another summer downtown promenade as we did this past September. This is tentative and requires some partners to help us finance, organize, and execute the event. Our anticipated financial commitment beyond our usual volunteer efforts of organizing and marketing. Our anticipated financial commitment is $500 for that. September 2022, Meet Me on Main Street. It's being organized by the KDCA in downtown Kempfield. There's expected to be more of these events in the rural hamlets around North Grenville, but this event specifically will be taking place in downtown Kempfield in September. The event will include tables to sit down for a meal, prepared food providers, local music, and a number of other activities. Our anticipated financial commitment to that is $250. And of course, September 20th to the 24th, 2022, the International Plowing Match. This is a community-organized multi-partner event that may see up to 75,000 people attend it, it will be located about 1 kilometer from the BIA footprint. So right on our doorstep. The BIA will be actively involved in efforts to organize an on-site presence for our local business community, and we are considering a potential off-site event or activity intended to draw people from the plowing match to the downtown. Our anticipated financial commitment is $1,500 for that. Early October 2022, Kempfield Oktoberfest, organized by Herb Kluche of Jam Productions in a yet undisclosed location. This appears to have limited benefits to the BIA and its members, so we're not recommending a financial commitment. But if we think there's an opportunity for us to contribute or our members to benefit from it, we will definitely provide support to the event. Late October 2022 will be our traditional Creepy Kempfield event. It's a BIA organized trick-or-treat style event where visitors to our downtown can go door to door to participating businesses to get treats. The last couple of years we haven't been able to do that. We've come up with some other creative ways to have fun and celebrate Halloween in Creepy Kempfield. We've had a pumpkin carving contest, the pumpkin trail where they've all been displayed, scavenger hunts, and other smaller activities. We anticipate a financial commitment of $500 for that. Late November 2022, we'll have our annual general meeting, which is an annual functional event for us. It's intended to inform our members and stakeholders about the previous year, the BIA's activities of the previous year, and presents the following year's budget and annual report. Our anticipated financial commitment's $300. And of course, the Santa Claus Parade, which made its return this year and everyone was thrilled with. We're hoping it will continue to be an annual event and that the parade route will continue to pass through downtown Kempfield, creating a potential benefit to our BIA members. We want to say a special thank you to the Kempfield District Community Association who stepped up this year to organize the parade at the last minute, and of course all the supporting partners that helped them through that. And for the first time in recent memory, the BIA actually entered a float in the Santa Claus Parade this year. Our anticipated financial commitment to that event would be $500. And of course, early December 2022, we're hoping to have our second Old Town Christmas Promenade. A multiple day event, hopefully next year, with several festive activities and promotions, including live music, horse-drawn wagon rides, burn barrels, storytelling, visits with Santa, and more. In 2021, we're going to have this event actually this coming Saturday. So Saturday, December 11th. So we're really hoping that we get people out, get lots of support for the event. It's going to be a lot of fun. Our anticipated financial commitment for the 2022 event will be $1,500. We've got some other minor events planned as well, more activities and promotions. We plan to have a Mother's Day promotion where we'll commit $150 to that promotion. Father's Day, $150 to that promotion. We'd like to have another trivia night. That was a big hit a couple of years ago when we had our trivia night, so $250 for that. And we'd like to return to our Not Just Ladies Night and have another fun night where we invite the community downtown and show them everything we have to offer. So a $600 commitment for that. And we also set aside another $700 for miscellaneous expenses related to marketing and programming. I died. The Old Town Kempfield BIA wants to both acknowledge and show sincere gratitude for the financial support of Council and Municipality of North Grenville over the past year. Additionally, many of our events and activities would not have been possible without the considerable contributions of municipal staff. I wanted to specifically highlight the efforts of Matt Gilmer over the past year. Matt has been vital to the BIA as we've developed a relationship strengthened our relationship with the municipality and also with the local Chamber of Commerce and other groups that are committed to the financial health of our business community. Matt has been absolutely essential to that and provided more support than the BIA could have reasonably asked for. So we wanted to highlight Matt's efforts there. And that's it, unless there's questions.
Thank you very much. That was very thorough. We appreciate the efforts, and obviously we're very heartened to see that many of our local businesses, small businesses in the BIA footprint are in fact doing well, if not thriving, for their own reasons. So it's great that we're able to provide that balance here in North Grenville between major commercial hubs and unique and scenic and compelling downtowns. Colleagues, any questions for Mr. Johnson? Councillor Barclay?
Not a question, just a comment. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you for the presentation, Mr. Johnson. As you know, I'm very familiar with the struggle of delivering value for businesses downtown on what is arguably one of the smallest BIA budgets in Ontario. So I commend you for sticking with it. So congratulations on the opportunity next year to really deliver value to businesses downtown. And from your list of activities, it seems like we're up for a great year next year in 2020. So thank you.
Just to comment to Councillor Barclay. Yes, absolutely. When you look at what's on tap for next year in our community, it's actually kind of overwhelming, all of the things that are being planned for next year. So there's never been a better time to live in North Grenville, that's for sure.
Okay, thank you. Other colleagues? Councillor Strachan?
Thank you for the presentation. The list is very comprehensive, and I guess just to tag onto what Councillor Barclay has said, I appreciate also that it's not just the list of activities, but also shows that, you know, the other community groups that are involved and where there's synergies and also where there are different roles that are being played in all of these things. KDCA is obviously very prominent, and it's always good to have Herb Cloutier on our side for all the productions. He's a professional, and it brings everything up to another level. So. Yep. Thank you. I it's remarkable to be able to pull all of this off with the budget that is available to the BIA, and even where there's other funds that have come about. It's going to be an exciting year. So yeah, thank you very much.
Anything else, Council? Deputy Mayor? I apologize, Councillor Sullivan. Go, Deputy Mayor. And then I'll go to you. You can have the last word.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Okay, tougher question. Your budget went up by, is that 200%? Is that the math? What can the BIA, especially the businesses downtown, especially, and the residents of North Grenville, expect? I see the list, and a lot of these things we've done. You've added some there for sure, and that's fantastic. So I guess maybe you can explain what will the contrast be, the way it was and what we're going to do going forward. How do you see the impact on the businesses downtown? Are they going to see, the big increase in business or activity from the BIA, that kind of thing? So I think that's probably a good question. I've had that before from a couple of businesses.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think just based on the sheer volume of what we're going to ambitiously try to do next year, a lot of our members see the value of the BIA being primarily to drive human traffic to the downtown. So to actually bring, boots and hearts to the downtown as opposed to just sort of talking about what we're doing. So I think with the types of events we have now, including the promenade events, which council and the municipality has supported, we're actually bringing a larger volume of people to the downtown. And not just that, but also improving the experience for those visitors as part of those events, which typically means those folks will be spending longer in our downtown, taking a little more of a look around to see what's there, stopping into a couple of businesses that are there, or noting maybe some places that they didn't realize that were down there that they now do. So I think it's just sort of taking what we've had before and just amplifying it, improving the experience, and just adding a lot more depth to our programming from what we've done before. It's not always easy to convince people that the BIA is more than just events, but like I said, primarily that's how our members see it, as our value is driving people to the downtown. And I think with our ambitious outlook for next year that we're definitely going to be able to ramp that up for sure.
Councillor Sullivan?
Thank you for that presentation. I have a couple of comments that I think it's great that there's so much activity in the downtown core, and it's a happening place, and I like to see that even grow as your plans are. So speaking of that, I'd like to know if the BIA has any plans to make it more pedestrian and bicycle friendly downtown. Like, have you made any plans to encourage cyclists and pedestrians to get into the downtown core? I know that parking is sometimes identified as an issue. So that's one thing. And the other is, would there be any plans for maybe outdoor cafes, like a few more? There's a table and chairs, I think, in the summer in front of one of the businesses, but would that be an opportunity for more of them to do in some of the bump outs? And if we can use off-street parking or encourage cycling and pedestrian traffic downtown. Is there a plan for that in your working documents?
Okay, thank you, Councillor. I'll handle the first question first. So for next year, as part of our plans is to work with Hilary Janot to develop downtown as an Ontario by Bike designated area. So we want the downtown to be recognized by Ontario by Bike, so we can sort of stamp that on everything we do, that we are bike friendly. Part of that process is to reach out to, I believe it's 6 businesses within the downtown, to encourage them to also become bike friendly with us at the same time. And that will help us to move forward to find that designation. I find that we actually have a lot of bicycle traffic through the downtown. The problem is it just goes through the downtown. It typically doesn't stop. But I know that with adding a designation like this, and through by continuing to invest in street furnishings, like I know there's 3 new bike racks that we have to place in the downtown as well. So once we have that designation, and I think if we continue to add the infrastructure, and I also think it's important for us specifically next year, once the nice weather starts, is because of the programming we have for next year, is to encourage people to get there by bike and to walk. I'm a firm believer that we don't have a problem with parking in the downtown. I think we have enough parking. It's just where the parking is located is not always the most convenient, that people would prefer it was in front of wherever their destination is. So by encouraging people to come to our events and participate, but to walk down there or to bike down there, I think that will help people see us as that sort of bike-friendly and active transportation-friendly area.
Okay, thank you. So when you mentioned 6 businesses to become bicycle friendly, that would mean that one of the 6 perhaps would have a public bike repair station, as well as bike racks in front of their businesses where they could secure bikes and lock them up and park them.
I know
They'll keep biking through if they don't have a place to stop and park it.
Yeah, we are actually this year as part of one of the grants we applied for, we actually applied for funding for a bike, I don't want to call it a corral, but a big bike rack that I believe would have held 20. So instead of having a bike group pass through because there's nowhere for them to put their bikes, we want to, through applying for funding, to acquire some of this infrastructure and some of these pieces that will help us. I know as far as a business becoming bike friendly, having a bike rack in close proximity is important to that. It doesn't, I don't believe it states how many bikes that bike rack needs to be able to accommodate. But I think based on the fact that we've sort of got 3 waiting to be placed, I think there's an opportunity to work with the businesses that are interested in becoming bike friendly and trying to make sure that we have those new racks as close to those key businesses as we can get them.
So if I understand, then you have 3 racks already, but they haven't been installed.
They haven't been placed yet, yeah.
Okay. So so they'll be there by spring.
I certainly hope so, yes.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, what was the second question?
What your plans are to make it pedestrian and bike friendly. Oh, and have more opportunities for outdoor cafes, like on sidewalks or on the bump outs in the downtown core.
So we've actually tried that for the last 2 years by approaching the individual businesses and discussing it with them, like I said, individually. And there hasn't been a lot of buy-in for it, and I think there's 2 reasons for that. One is a lot of our businesses who would consider doing something like that, I'll specify, like Bubba and Bugs, Krusty Baker, maybe Mr. Mozzarella, is that if you put tables and chairs outside that are the restaurant's responsibility, that means they have to have an employee out there to be able to manage that space. And up until now, through the health unit, those tables and chairs would need to regularly cleaned. And I think the businesses were a little hesitant because of, the financial situation over the past couple of years to sort of start throwing extra wages into their budgets to try something like that out. And there was another part to that, and I think this is definitely a legitimate concern, is that there were just some issues around safety, like would people be comfortable enough sitting on one of our bump outs with traffic going by? Would they feel comfortable with that? There's been some mixed feedback about who would be willing to sort of sit at a table at one of the bump outs. Or even if we were to designate one of the parking spots along Prescott Street, for example, there seemed to be a hesitancy around how safe that would potentially be to sit out there as a visitor on those tables and chairs. So the conversations have been had. They will continue to be had. And if we recognize an opportunity, I think it might be in a public, I don't know how to say this, potentially a public area. So rather than have one business primarily responsible for staffing, maintaining, cleaning, I think the businesses would be more likely to appreciate sort of a public space that might have tables and chairs like that.
Okay. And then my last question is, last year, I believe you gave us the number of new businesses, which was quite outstanding considering we'd had COVID, versus the number of businesses that had closed down. So can you give us that number again this year, please?
4. We had 4 new businesses move in this year.
4 new in
Yes.
2021. And did you lose any?
Yes, 2.
Okay, 4 new and 2 closed.
One really hurt too.
Sorry, what?
One really hurt too.
Which one did you lose?
Hobbiesville. It was a very unique businesses that drew traffic and interest in that little hub. So it was a loss for sure.
Okay, so 4 new and 2 closed, so the net is up
2.
2.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem.
Okay. Colleagues, I do know we have 2 other delegations, so we should probably move on. I'll acknowledge Councillor Strachan for a final comment. Go ahead.
Just very quickly, Darren, I appreciate your time, and I know we do have to move on. Regarding the bike-friendly side of things, I think that there's some great work that's happening between the active transportation, BIA, as well as the tourism side of things to, come up with some creative routing and all that kind of stuff too, that I think will help everybody, not just the BIA. So I think that that's more to follow on that. 2 very quick questions. One is regarding leveraging volunteers and whether you feel that some of these bigger events that you'll have enough volunteers, or if it's, I guess, too soon to tell. And the other one is regarding expanded hours for any of the businesses that wouldn't normally be open for maybe when some of the events are, and do you have support right now from businesses to be open for the events that they wouldn't normally be, when they wouldn't normally be open?
Okay, I'll tackle the second one first. Don't want to trust my memory again. I think when it comes to hours, that's why it's important for us what hours we choose to have our events. Having events in the evening makes sense in some cases, but if the true purpose of our events is to drive traffic to our downtown and for those visitors to interact with the businesses, to visit them, to recognize that they're there, it's hard to do that obviously with the doors closed. So we're very careful about sort of the timing of our events and when they are. So sort of with that in mind, I think there's also our businesses are paying attention. And when it comes to like our Christmas promenade coming up this Saturday, they'll be watching. So I think the more we're able to provide value, and once they see that, yes, these events that we're doing are driving those large numbers of people, I think more and more will get that sort of extra effort on behalf of the businesses to adapt and to expand their hours or even shift their hours, right? Sometimes it's not a case of, staying open till 9 o'clock. Sometimes it's opening later rather than opening at the same time. So I think they're paying attention and they're waiting and they're watching to see how we're doing. So yes. And as far as the volunteer thing goes, we are growing our list of volunteers. It was a small list for a long time, but it has started to grow, and as with each large scale event, we're adding more and more names to that. But not all of our volunteers have a consistent schedule and can help us out all the time. God bless our high school students. They're vital to a lot of our events, but they're not always available at the times when we have our events. So We've had some great participation from the local high schools when it comes to this Saturday's event, so we're pretty excited about that. But yeah, the idea is to sort of grow a list till it's big enough that if we call someone up, if they say no, we're not euchred, right? We want to be able to have enough people that we can have an event consistently. And I know we've got some seniors who are also part of our volunteering, so we've sort of got both ends of the spectrum covered right now.
That's excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor, for indulging more questions.
No problem. Thanks. Okay, colleagues, so Mr. Johnson, thank you. I think you've been very thorough. Obviously, we're quite pleased with the vigor and energy and substance the board and yourself and volunteers are bringing to ensuring a very vibrant downtown, of which we are very proud. And I think the Ottawa Road Trips 2021 publication, which heavily features downtown Kempfield and some surrounding natural assets like Ferguson Forest and Kempfield Campus, Agroforestry Center, et cetera. It was lovely to see such a glowing, I think, review of what North Grenville has to offer, in particular our downtown. So with that in mind, council colleagues, Jim, Deputy Mayor, you're on the BIA board, so perhaps you'd be interested in moving. Please, that council receive the presentation, BIA Budget 2020, receive the report titled Old Town Kempfield BIA Annual Report, and approve the proposed budget as presented. You're willing to move? A second over here. Thank you, Councillor Strachan. I'll call the question unless there's further comment. Seeing none, all in favor? Good. Thank you. That passes. Thank you. Good luck. You've got a busy year, as we all do. Okay, I think now we're welcoming Kimberly Hunton from on behalf of the dialogue we've had on the Birds Rapids Conceptual Design Plan. Ms. Dunlop, are you joining that conversation? Okay. Mr. Rose, thank you. Come on down. Welcome. I also recognize that there is a member of the Community Association here. Several? Okay. So should you want to provide any feedback, we'll provide that chance afterwards. Okay. Welcome, Mr. Burrow and Ms. Hutton, to the council meeting this evening.
Good evening, and thank you for having me, as well as Kim. Firstly, I'd like to thank Kim Hunton and her team at WSP for all their work and in the creation of this conceptual design plan. I would also like to thank the community of Burris Rapids for their significant contributions to the plan and their continued support. Over the past year and a half, WSP has been working in consultation with stakeholders and the community to establish a conceptual plan for the hamlet of Burris Rapids, focusing on maintaining the heritage of the community while also the operational requirements of the municipality, stakeholders, and the community. The purpose of this report is to provide council with the final draft of the Burris Rapids Conceptual Design Plan for your review and comment, as well as to seek approval to move forward with the plan through more detailed investigations, designations, and design. The conceptual plan focuses on the hamlet as a whole, with recommendations throughout. Through development, each roadway was considered individually based on individual characteristics and constraints. Upon approval of this report, several next steps are required prior to any further design for the community, including further heritage designation and planning and detailed investigations of the physical conditions and legal layout of the hamlet. The municipality has included next steps in budget deliberations for 2022. I would like to pass things off to Kimberly Hunton of WSP for a more detailed look through the process and design. That's the,
Excellent. We do want to talk transportation policies, I assure you. Just not right now. All right.
I drew the straw.
Okay, I think we're on to the right one.
Perfect. Madam Mayor, councillors, I do want to thank you for having us today to present the conceptual design plan as we've been developing. As Ryan said, we've been working on this for a while, and we came to see you quite some time ago when we had initiated it, and we've been through a number of stages, and it's very exciting to be here to show it to you. Also in person, this is my first in-person meeting, so in a very long time, so thank you for that. It's a little bit, I have to remember how to deal with that. So, the wrong way. So this one.
Just give me one moment.
Just a little technical difficulty. I think you may be able to
No
proceed
problem.
without the slides.
Sure, no problem. The first step, the first slide is really just a reminder of what it is that we were up to and what we were doing. So there was a need for capital improvements within Burt's Rapids, within the hamlet. In the right-of-way, there are deteriorating asphalt. The sidewalks are in need of some repair. Over the years, the layers of asphalt have raised to the point where we have drainage patterns that have been changed, and so a lot of these issues need to be addressed. There was a plan that came forward a number of years ago, and there was some concerns from the community at that time, as you recall, that just to make sure that the character was being considered and that we were making sure to keep to the heritage features that are out there and the look and the feel of the actual community. The vision itself, there is a vision for Burt's Rapids within the official plan, and the key really is about maintaining the small village characteristics, preserving the hamlet's heritage through streetscaping and landscaping, ensuring that we're minimizing the traffic, speeds, light pollution, noise through the hamlet itself, and ultimately in the end what that does is provide an area and a community that all residents and all ages can walk and move around in. I think we're good, maybe? Oh, one more. One more then. Perfect. So the project process, we were last here to see you during step one, where we were collecting the background information, and there was a large amount of information that was already compiled and put together at that time. We were really just coming out to find out what the key concerns were and if anything had changed. Since then, we've gone through some alternative development, a number of consultation process side of things, developing the design criteria, and now we're at the point where we're bringing the conceptual design forward in step 4. The preliminary consultation that was carried out was really bringing forward what had been done in the past. There was a review of past studies, consultation, documentation. There was a number of presentations that the Burt's Rapids Community Association had brought forward to council, as well as some municipal correspondence, emails, issues of concern. We grouped them into some of the themes, and the key areas really were related with the drainage and problems with the drainage, some of it related to the layers of asphalt I mentioned, as well as some of the changes within the street and the conditions of the street, but also about ensuring that there is pedestrian access across Grenville Street, that there is street parking, and that the parking considerations are looking at Grenville Street itself for the tip-to-tip trail. There was some new issues that were raised due to COVID, with Henry Street Park being an area that people to try and escape their houses sometimes, which is great that it's a facility available, but became a bit of a nuisance sometimes for the residents that were living there due to parking and some other pieces, and then space requirements for emergency services. So we started out with looking at, next slide please, thanks. We started out by looking at the context of the village. And so to develop the design criteria, best practice review was carried out. And we looked at certain themes: the road widths, speed limits, the sidewalk placement and geometry, parking, street lighting levels, things like this. And we wanted to do and take a good look at the context of what Burt's Rapids is compared to other communities that were similar. And in the end, essentially most of the communities where the width of the roadways were less than what the Transportation Association of Canada design guidelines would suggest, they would have a heritage conservation district designation, and in that doing so they were preserving the widths of the road as they had been over the number of years that they had been there. So the design criteria that we carried forward did look at having the 4.5 meter wide roadways for 2 directional traffic. It also looked at the widths of the sidewalks and what parking would be, but the other one is a sort of key one related to how the design moved forward was in that the design vehicles, because there's emergency vehicles and sewage pumping vehicles and things like this in the community, that they would not have to stay in their designated lanes for turning movements. The potential for conflict is very low with the volumes that are out there. And so being able to turn out of their lane and into different lanes, they can use the full roadway. So this was something that was carried forward. And then as part of that, the recommendation was made that the municipality take a look at the option to have a heritage conservation district study done on Burt's Rapids. So following the design criteria piece, we also looked at a design toolkit. And the design toolkit was, again, looking at the different themes of traffic calming, street operations, drainage features, streetscape and site furniture, as well as parking and pedestrian facilities. So things like shared spaces versus sidewalks versus multi-use pathways. These are just a few examples of some of those. It was a very long list of a toolkit that's in the report, but we wanted to use these toolkits to then develop the cross sections that we were going to carry forward. So with the design criteria, next slide please. With the design criteria and the design toolkit, we ended up taking a look. So originally the idea was that the side streets, we would develop a cross-section, develop cross-section alternatives for the side streets, develop cross-section alternatives for Grenville Street. As it turns out, every street in Burt's Rapids is very unique, and everyone has its own challenges. So we ended up looking at each street individually, as Ryan mentioned. The dry hydrant on East Street presents different issues compared to the park on Henry Street. Mary Street had a very narrow right-of-way. So in looking at each of the individual streets and considering the design criteria and the design toolkit, alternatives were developed for each. And some of the things that were carried forward within the design development, the alternative development was the crossfall on the roadway. So whether we keep the crown in the center of the road and drain the road to both sides, or whether we use a super elevation, because it's only 4.5 meters, have all the surface water go to one side, that we can maybe do something different on one side of the road versus the other. The location of the sidewalk, if we were providing a sidewalk on the side streets, and then the type of drainage, whether it be a gutter or a swale or some sort of rain garden and this kind of thing, and that often ended up having trade-offs with parking. There's not enough room on the side streets to provide an enhanced grass swale with parking, so in some cases there would be these trade-offs within the alternatives to bring forward. So the consultation that then was carried out, we ended up bringing the alternatives. So this lists all the consultation. Should probably be titled consultation, but the beginning front is the consultation that we carried out with you guys at the beginning. And then the Burt's Rapids Community Association, we had a workshop with them in June, and it ended up going over 2 different days, 2 different sessions. The design criteria and the toolkit was circulated in advance. And then we had an interactive working session where we reviewed the alternatives and talked about what the trade-offs were, what the key points were that were liked, what would fit best for them within the community. And it was extremely helpful in just having a really good understanding of some of the sort of nuances within the street, because as we were looking at each street, each one had individual things for all of them to look at. The information that came out of those workshops was what we brought forward to the design and the development of the concept design, that then we came back to the stakeholders and the agencies in a meeting and the public open house that we had in September. So what we heard, the comments that we have summarized up here, there were lots and lots of really good comments that we received. These are not this is just a scratching of them. And they're from the workshop and as well from the open house. Road operations were key about having shared spaces for pedestrians and operating pedestrians in shared spaces. And also about having reduced speed limit in the hamlet, but at the same time considering how much signage that would mean to reduce the signage clutter. From a parking perspective, the on-street parking was preferred as opposed to having an off-street parking lot somewhere where, a designated area, and for it to be grassed parking with or without a grid kind of structure to it, but the preference was for grassed parking. And to have parking, if we are going to be looking at parking on Henry Street, having it near the park to serve the park, as well as to make that parking accessible. And on Grenville Street itself to enhance some of the abilities to access the community mailboxes, as well as having the just the sign clutter in general across the hamlet. And minimizing it, not to have sign clutter, to minimize the sign clutter. From a traffic calming and pedestrian crossing, so traffic calming, the priority was really on Grenville Street itself, and the idea was that from the toolkit, the options that were available that were more permanent were preferred. Interim solutions, such as some of the vertical measures or speed signage and those kinds of things, we're seeing that there was some concern that they might become the long-term solution, and so the idea of moving some of the more permanent ones forward first was ideal. And these were formed through curb extensions as well as the pedestrian crossovers that ended up being recommended. Again, it was about some of the reduction in the sign clutter for the pedestrian crossover locations. Drainage, the grass swale was preferred over any of the rain gardens or the dry swale. This was because of the plantings and the added maintenance that might be required as part of that, and if they started to not look as nice. And to have some of the comments that were received were focused on moving into the next steps of the detailed design, where we ensure that the profile of the roadway and the height of the roadway is considered, as well as the tie-ins to the existing residents, particularly those ones that are close to the road edge already, and how those are going to tie in, as well as communicating and consulting with the Rideau Valley Conservation Area for how we are draining into the Rideau River and what we're draining into the Rideau River. And trees and landscapes, there was some comments received on the initial plans that were brought forward to the open house, and we have made some refinements to that, which we'll show you, but some refinements to the landscape design just in how they appear at the tip-to-tip trail crossing, and to still try and have as many trees as we can along Grenville Street itself. So the plan itself, and it's hard to see up there, it's a large plan on a small screen, but following the open house, we did make changes to the community mailbox area related to the accessibility of the platform and how the community mailboxes are set up, as well as the stopping areas. There's 2 stopping areas so that people, when they're stopping to get their mail, aren't blocking driveways. They're designated areas, as well an accessible parking spot was added at the community mailboxes in front of the community hall. At the tip-to-tip trail entrance, the alignment was modified slightly just in relation to how the pathway crossed, and there was some comments from Parks Canada related to the stop sign that they've recently installed there, as it would relate to the sight distances and how they are connected with the swing, with the bridge. And so the pedestrian crossover that is at the south end, close to the bridge, is no longer a raised crossing. It is at grade, and that was to maintain the location of the stop sign, such that the first stopped vehicle would have the proper sight distances and the sight lines for crossing over the single lane bridge. As well, some of the plantings were modified, and some suggestions for some of the pollinators and native species and things like this were added to the actual design and the concept plan to carry forward. Overall, there's curb extensions, so throughout Grenville Street, there are curb extensions at each of the side streets, so bump outs at each of the side streets, as well as tree plantings at most of the side street on those bump outs, or some sort of native plantings that have been suggested. There's 3 pedestrian crossovers, PXOs, one up at the community mailboxes, one at Center Street, and then one down at the tip-to-tip trail. Overall, the speed limit has been reduced, or recommended to be reduced, to 40 kilometers an hour on Grenville Street. A speed survey, we did do a speed survey, and the average speed is 41 kilometers an hour, with the 85th percentile at 48 kilometers an hour. And so by changing the sign alone doesn't make things happen, but by designating the curb lanes with the paver stones for parking and the curb bump outs and things like this at the same time will make that possible and enhance it. And that would obviously need to be done in consultation with the counties, the United Counties, because they are, it is their road. Next slide, please. So this is just to give a bit of an idea of what it might look like in the rendering, so the before and after. So what it looks like right now, looking north of Mary Street at the community hall, top left corner, is where the community mailboxes are, just to the right, the community hall just to the right. And so this is when the locations where there would be the pedestrian crossover. And then spinning around 180 degrees, this is just on the bottom left is Mary Street, sort of cutting into Grenville. And just you can see the curb bump out extension and the landscaping, and the idea of the paving stones for the parking and how it would narrow the lanes. So this one's really hard to see. Hopefully you can see it on your screens. But the idea really here in the whole village, the idea was to improve the comfort for having a shared space. Because the shared space for pedestrians and everybody working in the same area was the desire of the community, we had looked at recommending it as a zone of 30 kilometers an hour. This would need to obviously be done in coordination once the speed policy. I know everybody's anxious to see what's happening with the policy, so we'll see, but the coordination with the policy that's to come. But to reduce some of the sign clutter, because it would be 40 kilometers on Grenville and 30 kilometers as an area, there would be one area sign on the entry points, but on the exit points, we elected not to include that signage because you're coming into a higher zone anyway. And one of the areas to reduce some of that sign clutter that was a concern. In general, the dark green areas are grassed parking areas, and we've looked at taking, there's a grid system that can add some structure to it, so this is for consideration during the detailed design. As well, the light green spaces would be the enhanced grass swales. They're shallow grass swales, but they will provide some enhanced drainage and filtration. There's granulars underneath and a subdrain, so it would be filtering some of that water before it ends up in the Rideau River. On Mary Street, as I mentioned, it's a very narrow right-of-way, and so we have concrete gutters on Mary Street. And then, as I was mentioning earlier, the super elevation, we did move a lot of the roads. There was a number of the roads that were already super elevated, but as we carried through and looked at each of them individually, a number of them now with the 4.5 meters are all, we're suggesting to drain the surface water to one side. So Henry Street would be to the east, East Street would actually be to the west, just to confuse everybody. The Center Street on the east side would be to the south. And just to mess everybody up again, on the west side, it would be to the north. And then South Street would be to the south. So, and Oxford Street, I don't want to forget about Oxford Street, it's to the west. So the idea here is just so that it was in looking at where the driveways were and how close they were in proximity to the right-of-way. And if we were trying to enhance any of the drainage on some of the other sides, we would be losing a lot of driveway and parking spaces, and where people have some outbuildings in the way that the right-of-way is set up. And so that's why a lot of these roads end up with super elevation to the one side to try and protect the driveway side and the parking piece and some of the front steps that are in there. The other pieces I really to highlight on the overall plan is that there is a concrete sidewalk on Center Street on the east side of Grenville. On the north side, 2 accessible parking spaces on Henry Street right at the park. And all of the roads are 4.5 meters with the exception of East Street, which would be 5 meters, and that's because of the emergency vehicles and access to the hydrant. To make the turn and to have the movements, it was required to be 5 meters. So same idea here, Center Street looking, so on the top side, Center Street looking east between Grenville Street and East Street. You can see the condition of the sidewalk on the north side, and so change to the sidewalk and then a concrete gutter on the south side that would eventually go into an enhanced swale past the houses. Turning around, you can see the sidewalk that's by the tree, and it's moved out to the road edge, and that's to provide some additional protection to the large trees that are on that side, with some parking on the one side. Next slide. And then Henry Street, looking north, this is the parking. There is one change. This rendering was done for the open house. We did suggest changing that to permeable paving stones at the time of the refinements for the parking on Henry Street for maintaining it during the winter. As well, on Mary Street, you can see this is just to give it it's one of the roads that's a bit different with the gutters on either side. So the next steps really are, Ryan spoke to a lot of them already, but there are some additional investigations to get ready for the detailed design. That would be the topographical and legal survey. There was a number of areas where the right-of-way was, there was some steps and things that were encroaching within the right-of-way of the mapping that we had, so it's a legal survey would be needed for any of the detailed design. This will also pick up all of the elevations and where the driveway tie-ins are and help with the drainage components. A tree inventory, which will highlight the species, the general condition of the trees, and help when it comes time to detailed design to make sure that they're being protected through the specifications that are being input. A sewer investigation, this would be like a camera that goes in through the sewers. Probably not needed on the side streets because we would end up updating those ones, but this would be more likely on Grenville Street where we're needing to do the tie-ins with any of the new bump outs. And then I mentioned the Heritage Conservation District study in relation to the design criteria. So a Heritage Conservation District study is the main priority of the Heritage District Conservation District study is to preserve the character of the area. It really focuses on the characteristics that make Burt's Rapid what it is, basically like what makes it special. And then the designation allows the municipal council to protect those areas and manage and guide the future changes that are made with policies. And they're tailored towards conservation and enhancements and protection of what's there. There is another way of having some of the considerations that you want for the community, and that's through a secondary plan. The secondary plan is something that's recommended and is in your official plan to do for Burt's Rapids. A secondary plan typically looks more towards the future and what would guide the overall development of the area. So it includes a part of the heritage character, and it's one of the components, but it's usually for a larger area where the heritage protection component is just one section of it. And then it depends on what the municipality might want to plan for, but it focuses more on if there's a certain height restriction, building offsets, and these kind of components within the secondary plan. And they're typically carried out with when there's a variety of goals to achieve beyond just the area conservation. And so this is why the Heritage Conservation District study was the recommendation. However, obviously this would need to be consulted with the planning group because of whatever their objectives are on that side of things with the community itself. So once that's done, it's the detailed design. Detailed design requires lots of coordination with the utilities, the United Counties, the Rideau Valley Conservation Authority, Parks Canada. A review of the maintenance process and requirements was something that came up through the discussion, so we included a chapter about some of the operations within the draft report. And then any of these elements would end up all of the pieces have a need for ongoing consultation with the community itself and the people that are going to be there. And so there's elements within each piece that would have that consultation component to it. So that is the end of my presentation, and I would like to take the opportunity to say thank you to Ryan for all of his help through this, and to Karen as well. They have been amazingly supportive through all of the and helping getting information to us. And the community and Burt's Rapids Community Association, the information that has been shared and given, and information along the way and input along the way has, I think, created a pretty good result in the end. So hopefully we've come a long way in a year and a half, so that's good. Thank you.
Mr. Brogue, do you have anything else to add right now? I feel like you do, or are you just here?
Nope, no, questions is great.
You were poised. Okay. Well, certainly I think we want to extend our appreciation to you. You were brought in, obviously, as a consultant with some additional expertise, insight, et cetera. And I think our hope from the beginning was always that the committee would be extremely well consulted and that you would be able to recognize and really make very strong recommendations to preserve, enhance, leverage, the very, very unique place and space that is Burt's Rapids. So no small feat, in my opinion, and it certainly sounds like you have brought extreme care and deliberation to the proposals that you've put on the table tonight. And I have to say the renderings look amazing when you look at some of those before and afters. I know we've got a ways to go to implement, but it's really fantastic to see the thought that has been put into this. And I know many conversations were had, so we appreciate your capacity alongside, of course, Karen and Brian to get everyone more or less on the same page. I hope I'm not overstating that. So I know I'll open it up to council questions right now, and I also recognize that we do have representatives from the Burt's Rapids Community Association. They had indicated a possible desire to speak, and I think the delegation is probably the best opportunity for them to do that. But before we go there, let's just turn to council colleagues in case there are things that should be said, need to be said. And I see Deputy Mayor Councillor Barkley. I'm looking over here. Okay, don't see anything yet. So go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, through you, Madam Mayor. No real questions, just comments, because I've been on some of your calls as we've been going along, so I've been involved. The back and forth has been amazing. You guys have, I think you've bent over backwards, but I think the community be congratulated because, wow, did you guys ever step up and contribute to this particular, you really care about your community, and I get it. So thank you for doing that, and I'm sure the consultant's probably thinking, wow, yeah, they were quite involved, and maybe you guys would be hired on the side for some other community projects, but anyways, well done, and I'm sure there's lots more talk to do, and there's more things to tweak, and this is a process, but you guys have done a fantastic job of engagement and whatnot. I know I haven't been in all the meetings, but the ones I've seen so far, it's great that we're trying to make something work for the community and for long-term for North Carnival. Thank you.
Councillor Barkley?
What a phenomenal amount of work that everybody's put into this. So I echo the sentiments of the mayor and deputy mayor about the degree of collaboration and cooperation between your group, Kimberly and Ryan, and the community led by the Burt's Rapids Community Association. I first got involved way back when we had some concerns about drainage and turning radius. So I wanted to know that we're still, believe it or not, in early stages. The recommendation is to go forward with a heritage district, heritage conservation district, which is a process. So I've got two questions. First one is, having done all this phenomenal work, have we shortened the amount of time it'll take to get a designation? I mean, can you estimate? Because I know the Heritage Conservation District process is, I won't say cumbersome, I just did, so a cumbersome process. So, certainly this must take us further down the road in terms of satisfying some of the criteria. So that's one question. And the final question is there any part of these design elements that can be implemented before we have a heritage conservation district designation? In particular, some of the drainage concerns on, I believe it was Center Street, and the turning radius for emergency vehicles going down East Street. So those are my two questions.
Okay, so for the time for the Heritage Conservation District designation, the design itself won't necessarily reduce the time for the designation, because the designation is looking at what is out there today in that sense of it will have the existing information that's been collected, which will help, and there has been a fair amount of consultation, obviously, so everybody can be on board with what the end result for some of those recommendations are. So from that side, I think that there probably could be a little bit of help in that part of it. The part that becomes, I think, did you use the word cumbersome? Okay, I was trying to think if it was onerous or cumbersome. So the part that can become, sometimes they can be done in a very short order of time. It does depend on some of the consultation and making sure everybody's on board. And so there's different levels with within the Heritage Conservation District designation. And so a full Heritage Conservation District designation and sort of the way it's intended to be is for the area itself. And it would look at the building side, it looks at the setbacks, it looks at all of the components that make the area what it is, not just the street itself, because obviously the asphalt wasn't there when Burt's Rapids was originally, settled. So the time for the consultation can be part of it that becomes a little bit longer, and making sure that everybody is on board with what the policies are that are going to be carried forward and having that agreement. That's where it can sometimes get a little bit bogged down. I do think that we have some good ideas moving forward with the streetscape side of it. So I would like to think that we've done enough work there that that part at least could be brought forward into the plan, and it would be some of the other elements that then just need to be hashed out, so to speak. So that's kind of a roundabout answer to say it depends. But I do think the streetscape components of it, I think there's been a fair amount of that part that could be brought into it. I don't know that it will reduce the time, though, just given how much other pieces might influence.
But I'm right in thinking that some of these design elements can't be implemented without that designation, because they contravene the Highway Traffic Act?
Do you want to take that one? Go for it. So again, it would depend on the municipality and the comfort level. So there is, I think some of the work could be done on some of the, potentially some of the side streets. I'd like to think East Street, probably. It's already that width. And it's not that far off of what the Transportation Association of Canada would be 5.4 meters instead of 5 meters, so that 0.4 meters. And we would have drainage features on the one side, and it would help alleviate the problems. The issue would be that I think East Street would have to be done in conjunction with Center Street because of the grade raise and the profile component of it. And so I'm going to have to now turn to Ryan and say if he's comfortable with that part.
Definitely. So I don't think we'd be prepared to state one way or another right now. As we move through the process, I believe there are potentially opportunities to implement some items before others, before the whole process has been completed. But I believe that those will come out through the development. So I'm not sure that we know exactly what pieces can be implemented at this time, but through the process we'll be considering that.
Okay, great. What's your sense of timing in terms of implementation? If we took everything, right, given what you've recommended, street by street by street, which I know every street is very unique in its character and needs, what would you guestimate, just setting aside kind of financial resourcing, but just having to pace oneself to tackle each street at a time. Do either of you have a sense of what the timing would be? And again, I recognize there's lots of discussions to be had around costing and what have you. I'm just curious. The detail's incredible, but obviously I'm sort of not clear on implementation.
Yeah, I might lean on Kim for this, but my initial impression would be that the physical works could start. Obviously, financial implications must be considered, but some items could be considered in 3 to 5 years, with major works happening 5 to 10. That is speculation at this time, and it also depends on are we constructing on a street-by-street basis? Are we constructing on a hamlet basis? So those are items that we'll have to work through.
And I presume now that you have this detailed design proposal, there's some feasibility study as well as, I know there's the designation, right, prospect, but what does Public Works do with this now?
So we will work through the next steps, all of the detailed investigations, everything that we need before going to the detailed design. That is our anticipation of how we will move this forward. So I noted that we have included some of the steps in our budget deliberations for 2022. So we're looking to move forward on this fairly quickly.
Okay, thank you. Colleagues, if there are no more questions, thank you, Councillor Sullivan, I appreciate that. Go ahead.
Thank you. My question is with respect to the gateway signage and the speed limits. The recommendation here was 40 on Grenville Street and 30 in all the other side streets. But that's part of this plan that's not yet going forward. So my question is, could we proceed with the gateway signage for 40 kilometers an hour that we hope to do for all the hamlets, or we have bringing forward for all of the hamlets, so, and then reassess whether or not it becomes 30 at a later date?
Yes, I think that's a very good point, because following this presentation, we will be discussing the transportation policies, and one of the items within that discussion is going to be the hamlet designations for gateway signage. So I think that is a good point from the speed limits for sure.
Okay, and then at a future time, decide whether or not it needs to be lowered again. Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Yeah, I'm going there. I'm just making sure. Okay, so let's thank both of you for being here this evening and for your collective and respective efforts, and we'll welcome members of the Birds Rapids Community Association, who I presume wish to speak. So thank you again. We might need to just sit close in case we need to get a response. Thank you. No problem. It's okay. Welcome. All good. Just press a button. You can press a button.
There we go.
There you go.
Okay.
Okay.
Inga Van Gemeren with the Birds Rapids Community Association. I just wanted to really kind of reemphasize what many of you touched on earlier with your first comments. This is seen not by 100%, but by a very significant majority of residents as a huge success. I never in my wildest dreams imagined we'd get close to what we asked for, but we got better than what we asked for. And I will chalk that up to everybody sitting in this room. We started off in a very painful place, let's be honest, but we are in a hugely successful place because of council and your direction and your support when we whined and complained, because of staff, because of WSP. We worked as a fantastic team. So it was a hard start. It was a very painful beginning, but we're so pleased. I personally am so thrilled and proud of the outcome, but it was all of that working together, that collaboration. It was value added. I really believe that we had things to contribute and WSP had things to contribute, and together that synergy, it's I'm sorry, it's fantastic. So I'm really looking forward to the next phase. We all are. We feel much more positive and energized with the whole thing. And if we can somehow figure out how to keep that collaboration and openness going, I know this is going to be fantastic. And I do want to call to Ryan. You said, you know, we might get a few things done in 3 to 10 years. Doesn't phase us in the least. If we have a plan, we will get there. So as long as we're not wasting time and we're not wasting anybody's money along the way, this will be nothing but fantastic. So thank you.
Thank you. And we do salute you and other members, as Deputy Mayor said, because you were vested from the beginning, passionate, caring, and had, I think, an incredible understanding of some of the needs of the community. And obviously you had a vision that I think ended up being shared by WSP. And those synergies, I think that's what good community planning is all about. What more could you ask for, really? So nice to see everybody coming to the table and bringing their best. And hard dialogue and difficult dialogue, if you can get through it, often produces really meaningful results. So that's nice to see. So 3 to 5 year timeline, potentially. My remaining question is just, I know the City of Ottawa is on that other side of the bridge, so I don't know if they care, if there's any relevant considerations in terms of, is the City of Ottawa paying attention? I understand that you've proposed things that are specific to the municipality of North Grenville, but just curious about opportunities for collaboration with our partner municipality, if you will.
Yeah, I can speak to that a little bit. The City of Ottawa, one of their councillors was very involved in this process through the stakeholder consultation, and when delivering notices for public information sessions, that type of thing, we did deliver to residents of the City of Ottawa. Like you said, this plan is specific to the North Grenville side, but obviously they have a direct connection to the hamlet. So they have been consulted, and I think there are opportunities in the future should they wish to collaborate. Should we wish to collaborate on some of the items?
Yes, please go ahead. So we'll take a final comment, and then I think we'll move on.
I'm sorry, I meant to make a comment about the HCD.
Mm-hmm.
So
The Heritage
Conservation District. So I was very pleased to see on page 24, I think it was, of the report, and Kimberly just outlined it again, about the possibility of going at it through a secondary plan rather than an HCD. I think the conversation should be had and explored. Some of you may know, most of you, I don't think, were here to live the pain of the first time an HCD was introduced to the community of Burt's Rapids. That was extremely painful, and there's still some resentment and concerns. Personally, I chalk it all up to education or lack thereof. So I personally am a supporter of an HCD, but I'm cautious because I need to make sure that we don't let it fail before it even starts, because it really deals with education and scope and understanding. So we must be very careful as we proceed forward to make sure that we've done the homework with the community. And I believe, Ryan, you did mention about making sure we've done that onboarding and getting folks openly on the page before we get into specifics. But it is a strong word of caution from the Community Association, who remembers full well the initial reactions.
Okay, understood. Thank you for that. Colleagues, I will look to advance the motion that's been proposed. So I'll just pull that up. And that, of course, is, I think I have it in my documents, that we are to receive the plan. Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you. So we are to receive the presentation, Burt's Rapids Conceptual Design Plan for information, approve the conceptual design plan as presented, and direct staff to include a heritage community plan. Heritage community plan. Is this the designation, or is this something else, the heritage community plan? Perhaps someone can speak to that. I thought so. Okay. Heritage, to include a study, right? Okay. To include the heritage designation, heritage district. Designation study in the 2022 budget deliberations. Mr. Bro, I don't know if I have that language exactly right. Heritage Conservation District, thank you. So direct staff to include a Heritage Conservation District study in the 2022 budget deliberations. Is that what we're looking for? Okay. Okay, colleagues, you've heard the motion. Councillor Barclay. Thank you, Councillor Sullivan. Okay, I'll call the question then. All in favor? Good, thank you. Okay, thank you. I'm going to recommend 5 minutes. I think the transportation policies are potentially an hour discussion, and I think we would all benefit from 5 minutes. I do not have my gavel, but we're taking 5 minutes. Thank you. Are we good? Good, okay. Welcome back, everyone. This is council meeting number 50 here on Tuesday, December 7th. We've had 2 excellent presentations. There is a third one under delegations, which is, of course, the transportation policies. These are long awaited, they are substantial, and I've just conferred with colleagues in regards to whether or not we can really do justice to them and also deal with 3 other fairly substantial items. The suggestion has been made that owing to I think a fairly light December 14th meeting, we could refer participation, the water treatment plant, and the accessibility plan to the 14th, and that would give us significant time to go through the transportation policies this evening without panicking about whether or not we are keeping ourselves or others here overly long. So I'll look for a, yes, thank you.
Just
And
one-
Mr. Dyke's going to add.
Thank you, Worship. And if also, if we request a slight moving of other items around on the agenda, the generator issue for Maplewood Hall, if we can move that to now, and the consent agenda to now, then we can release the staff that don't need to be here for the transportation policies, if that's agreeable to council.
So let's tackle the referral to December 14th, and then I think I can ensure that colleagues are comfortable with a reordered agenda. So colleagues, are we good to refer to the 3 items, participation, water treatment plant, and accessibility to the 14th, which is a week from now? I'll look for a motion. We'll need a motion and a seconder. Deputy Mayor, do I have a seconder for that? Okay, Councillor O'Sullivan, and I will call the question unless there are concerns. Referral motions, I have learned, are non-debatable. So all in favor? Good. Okay, that shortens the evening considerably. Thank you. So then we'll move to entertaining the consent agenda first, and then the generator discussion. Was that your proposal, Mr. Dyke? Okay. So with that in mind, there are quite a number of items that are under the consent agenda, largely minutes, as you can see, and I believe also Mr. Oakham, Chief Oakham's annual compliance report for emergency management is also on that list. As you know, items listed under the consent agenda are considered routine and no longer require further discussion. They are enacted in one motion. The exception to this rule is that a member may, of course, request that one or more items be pulled for discussion and voted separately. That is the prerogative of council. Are there any issues with the consent agenda items as presented? I see none. Then I'll look for a motion. We need a motion, correct? Okay, we'll look for a motion to approve the items on the agenda, on the consent agenda. Please, Councillor Strachian, seconder. Councillor Barkley, thank you. And then I'll call the question then for approval of the consent agenda items as presented. Thank you. So I believe Chief Oakham, you were relieved of further duties, is that correct? Okay, it's certainly in terms of council. I know you have many other responsibilities. Stay on deck for fire services, please. We are not fully relieving you of your duties. I do not have that power. Okay, so, but thank you for being here, and I think now we'll go to the Maplewood Hall generator. We are hearing from Mr. Guy. Okay.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and good evening, Council. So I'm here tonight to present a report on a backup generator for the Maplewood Hall as an alternative emergency location. So the emergency management team has deemed Maplewood Hall as an essential alternate location for emergency operations should the need arise. I believe this was also a community request as part of the 2020 budget process. So it was deemed that a standalone backup power generator is best suited at Maplewood Hall. The installation of a backup generator would allow the building to be functional during emergency situations when power has been interrupted. For this to happen, a reallocation of funds is necessary to facilitate this purchase and installation. Through the Director of Public Works and our Director of Finance, they've determined sufficient funds on the Public Works Operational Engineering Consultants budget line and have approved the reallocation of these funds for the purpose of covering the cost of the Maplewood Hall generator installation. The municipality issued an RFQ in accordance with the municipality's purchase and procurement policy and received 2 submissions from 2 vendors. So this report is to approve the award of the contract for the supply, installation, and commissioning of a Generac 24 kilowatt propane backup generator at Maplewood Hall to DR Howell Electric at a total cost of $14,989.09, excluding HST, and approve an adjustment to the 2021 operational budget to reallocate these funds from Public Works Operational Engineering Consultants line to cover the costs of the backup generator at Maplewood Hall. That is the report. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions? Okay, Councillor Barkley. Councillor Sullivan, are you looking to ask a question? No. Okay. Okay. Councillor Strachan, I only see one hand. That is Councillor Barkley. Did Councillor Strachan have a question? Okay. Councillor Barkley, go ahead.
It's referred to as a standalone generator. Does that mean it's not fixed to the building? It's portable?
It will be on a precast concrete pad next to the building.
Okay. Thanks.
And installation should be taking place sometime in mid-January.
Great. It's great to see that happening. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? And Councillor Barkley, I assume you were asking that because you were trying to assure that it aligns with what the Oxford Mills Community Association had expressed interest in?
No, I'm thinking down the road when the Township Hall is ready to be occupied. And
okay.
Maybe we can repurpose that as an emergency location. Who knows?
Okay. Sounds good. So I think Mr. Guy has effectively read the motion. It's to approve the award of the contract for supply, installation, commissioning of the propane backup generator at a total cost of just under $15,000 and to approve an adjustment to the 2021 operational budget. I'll look for a mover. Councillor Sullivan. Councillor Barkley. Thank you. I'll call the question unless there's further comment. Seeing none. All in favor? Good. Okay. Excellent. Okay. Mr. Guy and Mr. Brookman, it appears that you are also free to leave the meeting. Your services are no longer required at this moment. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. All right. So with that in mind, I believe we are good to go to hear from Mr. Bro. Are you doing this solo or do you have your... Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so welcome Mr. Chartier from Paradigm Transportation Solutions. I think you have a fairly substantial report for us this evening, so we might as well get to it.
It does look like the second presentation is up. There should be one before this. Perfect. Thank you for having me again. I'd first like to thank Jean Chartier and his team at Paradigm Transportation Solutions Limited, including Susan Hall and her team at Lura, for all their work in the creation of the new and updated transportation policies. Over the past year and a half, Paradigm has been working in consultation with council, staff, stakeholders, and the public to establish new transportation-related documents focusing on road safety. Next slide, please. The purpose of this report is to provide council with an update regarding the transportation policies, and specifically to request that council adopt the road safety strategy and accompanying policies. Additionally, we have provided information regarding amending the speed limits and traffic calming measures on select roads within the municipality. Next slide, please. Through this process, 4 transportation-related documents have been created, including the road safety strategy, a truck routes policy, an updated speed limit policy, and an updated traffic calming policy. Next slide. Accompanying these documents, several educational pieces have also been developed and as depicted in the slideshow. Specifically, 2 brochures have been developed to educate the public on general road safety practices and another on traffic calming. This also includes several lawn signs, as seen at the bottom of the presentation. Next slide. Through the development of these policies, as listed in the presentation, several roadways, which have been of high concern in the past few years, were reevaluated under these new policies through a testing phase in their development. Several new recommendations are being brought forth for information purposes at this time. Upon adoption of the policies, staff will proceed with the development of the recommendations and provide further details to council in early 2022. Next slide. In addition to the roadway evaluations, through the speed limit policy, it is also recommended that all municipal roadways within hamlets be designated as 40-kilometer-hour zones. Should this policy be adopted, this recommendation will come to council with an accompanying bylaw in early 2022. Now, I would like to pass things off to Jean Chartier of Paradigm for a more detailed look at the process and development of the policies.
So good evening, Madam Mayor and members of council. Thank you for the opportunity to present before you this evening. As Mr. Bro mentioned, the presentation this evening is going to focus on the 4 specific policy documents that we assisted the municipality in developing. So the presentation this evening is going to provide a very brief overview of the study and sort of how we've got to this point. Talk a little bit about the consultation efforts that have been undertaken in developing the policies in the road safety strategy, give you a high-level overview of the recommended policies, and then just a few summarizing comments for council's consideration. So, I guess, okay, yeah, we can work from there, yeah, that's good. Great, thank you. So the project and study that we've been assisting the municipality with emanated from the adoption of the municipality's first transportation master plan in 2019. The plan recommended to the development or the updating of several transportation policies, and as Mr. Bro mentioned, they're primarily related to road safety. Obviously, the pandemic and sort of the conditions associated with it tended to exacerbate concerns that residents were expressing about road safety, and there was a number of municipalities across the country and throughout North America that have been experiencing concerns, heightened concerns about traffic and speeding and those sorts of undesirable behaviors that motorists exhibit on the roadways. And North Grenville was no different. There was a heightening increase of resident concerns about traffic. So you initiated the study to develop the 4 policies. The expectation of the new policies is that they'll help the municipality to respond to traffic safety concerns more consistently and ultimately result in a safer road network. So the process to develop the policies, as Mr. Bro mentioned, has been an ongoing effort for about the last year. It's involved a considerable amount of consultation with members of council, as well as the community and interested stakeholders. This is just a bit of an overview of the activities that have been undertaken in terms of developing the policies from a consultation perspective. So early on, we updated the municipality's website, put some additional information about the project on the website, Also did a news release that was picked up by local papers, as well as on your website to advertise that the study was underway, and that there would be online community consultation in the form of a survey. And we'll talk a little bit in a second about some of the key survey results I've highlighted too, just for interest's sake. We conducted about a year ago at this time a workshop with yourselves to discuss the various policies, to get your feedback and input into some of the key issues and concerns that we should be addressing through the development of the policies. We held a virtual community meeting last January to get overall public input into the development of the policies. And then earlier this fall, I guess probably towards the end of October, beginning of November, there was a limited circulation of the draft policies to start to get input from some of the key stakeholders within the municipality. So I've highlighted two questions that we asked on the survey. There was 15 or 16 questions, I believe, that we asked the public for their input on with respect to road safety and their views about different ways the municipality could approach the topic. And the first question out was to ask folks what their key issues and concerns were about road safety and traffic. And overwhelmingly, speeding tended to be the most significant or most commonly referenced concern or issue that was reported by the participants in the survey. There was approximately 420 people who participated in the survey. We felt it was a fairly good representation of a community of this nature, and felt that it's useful information. Wouldn't necessarily call it statistically significant because it was an online survey, but it does provide a very good indication of community sentiment towards road safety and traffic issues. There were a couple of other interesting notes that came out of this question. The failure to obey road signs was also something that was commonly referenced by members of the community and participants in the survey, as well as traffic congestion and aggressive driving, which you will see start to pop up in our recommended road safety strategy in terms of some of the tactics that we're proposing to be able to address those specific concerns. Interestingly, not very few people, and I guess not surprisingly, felt there were no traffic issues within the community. I guess that's, you probably wouldn't have participated in the survey if you didn't feel that there weren't traffic issues. So, but it's interesting that there were 19 of the respondents that did indicate that they didn't feel that they hadn't noticed a traffic issue within the community. We also asked participants their views on different road safety tools to address concerns. And interestingly enough, participants felt that further investment in road improvements, so as you were just discussing, some of the works in Birds Rapids is an example of investments in road improvements that could help address road safety and traffic concerns, as well as increased enforcement was high on people's lists. Interestingly enough, lower speed limits on major streets was not a popular tool that participants indicated could address road safety, and they were less excited about public awareness campaigns, feeling that there is somewhat, I guess, limited reach in those sorts of programs. So with that sort of backdrop, with the online survey results, we then embarked upon our work on updating or creating new policies in 4 specific areas. So I'll touch first on the traffic calming policy. So the municipality has an existing traffic calming policy. The purpose of our work was to review that policy and recommend, excuse me, appropriate updates to the policy. We've taken the tact of proposing a new document, although we have referenced the previous document in coming up with the new document. So we've carried forward elements that were still relevant and appropriate. But we've reorganized the document slightly. As you can see, we've structured it in 5 sections. And I'll talk a little bit more about the policy, process, and measures as I go through the presentation. So the current policy that the municipality has in effect was adopted in January of 2017. And it's based on the previous edition of the Canadian Guide to Neighborhood Traffic Calming, which is the preeminent document in Canada for the application of traffic calming measures. That document has since been updated, so suggesting that your current policy doesn't reflect the most recent guidance of the recommended practice. And it only considered component of new developments or when residents submit requests. So it was more reactive than proactive. It set out a process whereby residents would have to follow 5-step process to determine the suitability of traffic calming. And it set out a list of preferred measures that the municipality would recommend applying to address traffic calming concerns. So what we've recommended in terms of updates is to revise the process by which the municipality receives, evaluates, and responds to citizen requests for traffic calming. We've proposed an updated evaluation methodology for determining if traffic calming is an appropriate response with an expanded set of screening criteria that incorporates some of the concerns that the municipality has expressed with its current methodology, as well as some input that we received through the consultation process. We've identified a broader list of applicable traffic calming measures, or what we're calling the traffic calming toolbox. There may be specific measures within the toolbox that the municipality tends to focus on in terms of their application, but the toolbox is rather broad to address the wide variety of potential conditions that the municipality may face in addressing a traffic calming request. And finally, as Mr. Breaux has mentioned, we've provided some typical communication, some community engagement process, including some sample materials for communication, as well as the engagement exercise in coming up with the traffic calming plan. This graphic obviously is not legible from this scale, but what we intended to illustrate is that we've come up with a 7-step process for involving both communities and stakeholders in the process of identifying traffic calming measures, and have provided a technical assessment process that's built into the overall traffic calming process. So this exhibit is illustrated in the updated policy.
And just to stop you, because this is very complex and very substantial, I have a question about the criteria, right? So you have a baseline set of criteria that must be triggered before you'll proceed to that next step, right? So I just want to ask the question, looking at the criteria, that you state that for traffic calming, the posted speed limit on the subject street is 50 kilometers an hour or less. So that basically renders almost every rural road for which there's 80 kilometers, 60 kilometers speed limit ineligible for traffic calming. Was that your intention, that we were taking almost every rural road off the table with a stated criteria of 50 kilometers an hour?
To you, Madam Mayor, the intention was that this was to be applied in the more urban areas of the municipality as opposed to the rural areas. But I do see the point in terms of its limited applicability in the rural areas, the way in which it's structured. So we can certainly make that adjustment. As I mentioned, this was primarily for urban settings, and in most cases, a speed limit of greater than 50 kilometers per hour in an urban area would typically be associated with some sort of more arterial road facility, which usually isn't a candidate for traffic calming. With the municipality's adoption of a area-wide 40K speed limits, there would be actually very limited situations in the urban area where the traffic calming policy wouldn't apply. But I do see your point in terms of looking at it. So what we can revisit if council so desires us to look at the rural applications, because we do actually include some potential rural traffic calming measures within the guideline, but for the most part, it's intended to apply in built-up areas, which for the most part are 50K and under.
Indeed, I guess the tension is, I think you understand in North Grenville, which is why we brought you in, and we can see how much effort and investment has gone into this, is there are areas of concern on rural roads. So obviously we just, I think, need some flexibility to potentially entertain some traffic calming measures, accepting your point that in many cases that 40-kilometer gateway signage applies to more urban areas. But I think we're an interesting blend of rural and urban, and I do wonder about potentially exercising some flexibility on the speed limit criteria.
We can look into that, Your Worship, but as I said, it's traffic calming is typically in more built-up areas, but it's a fair point for us to consider. Okay, thank you for that. So the traffic calming process, as mentioned, is a 7-step incorporating both engagement and technical assessment, which would then render a recommendation as to whether to proceed with a traffic calming plan for the municipality. We, as Mr. Bro has mentioned, we've developed a communication piece around traffic calming for posting on your website, making available once offices reopen and people go in and look for brochures and things of that nature. This could be also a print document. It's been set up that way as sort of a bifold or, sorry, two-page or a back-to-back copy, single-page information piece that's available, which lays out the process and the typical traffic calming, excuse me, typical traffic calming measures that would be applicable in North Grenville. As mentioned, there's also lawn signs that have proven very effective in many municipalities. That it's a pretty common practice now that we're seeing across, across Ontario and across the country in terms of using these sorts of lawn signs as a way to remind motorists that they are driving within a neighborhood area and that they should be operating more appropriately for the surrounding environment. So we provided, I think, was 4 different examples of lawn signs, and I think you're likely to come down to 1 or 2, and that will be an item that will be subject to further budget consideration in terms of making them available to the public. So we'll now move on to the speed limit.
Sorry, I do
Yeah.
have a couple of other questions
Please,
about traffic
yeah.
calming. Again, an issue that I think has animated certainly myself, if not other council members. So I just want to ask what your experience has been engaging with residents for which a traffic calming assessment, right, has been triggered. So I'm just looking to you for best practices in other municipalities. I note that you say a minimum survey response rate of 25% of all eligible households is required, with a minimum of 60% of respondents in favor of moving forward with traffic calming. So I'm just curious about how this has been achieved, right? And is it a paper survey? Is it a digital survey? You know, obviously we have a pretty lean team when it comes to public works. So how do we ensure, right, that these sorts of things, don't get sort of relegated to apathy or a limited response time? We know how distracted people are in this day and age. The other question I have for you in regards to who is surveyed is you say for collector and major collector roads, the study area will include all households with direct frontage onto the subject street plus local roads connecting to the subject street, recognizing collector roads typically serve a broader neighborhood. Totally understood. At the same time, I do think there often is an inherent conflict between people who are using those roads, right, as conduits to get onto the 416 and those individuals living on the road where they're seeing a significant change in traffic patterns or they're witnessing speeds, right, that they obviously are uncomfortable with for themselves, their children, their grandchildren, whatever. So I'd just be curious, what has been your experience with people responding to these surveys? How are they typically distributed? And on the collector road or major road qualification or category, how have you seen that played out in other municipalities? Because I can see that there are different needs, right, depending on how you're using the road. So if the traffic calming is for example, Heard Street in our case, I'm quite sure the residents of Heard Street would like people to go slower, and I'm quite sure the residents of Victoria Park that use Heard Street as sort of a way to get to the highway to avoid a community safety zone and multiple schools, daycares, and a hospital on concession are like, I need Heard Street to be at a certain speed to get where I'm going. So I just see conflict there, and I'm just curious to know how you've navigated that or have seen that navigated in other municipalities.
Thank you for the question. It's a very good point. So maybe just, I'll try not to wax poetic and historic too much, but previously I've been involved in traffic calming projects now for 25 years type of thing. And previous iterations, when traffic calming first came out in sort of the early 90s, the response rates were much higher because there was a desire to ensure that there was broad community support for the implementation of traffic calming measures. What we've seen over time is that that minimum threshold of participation has continually declined. So I remember early in the early days, it would be like, 60, 70% of participants or of residents would have to participate for it to be a valid survey. What we're recommending here is 25%, acknowledging that there is, people aren't as maybe engaged in these sorts of items on a regular basis, and that it's a much more accepted practice than it was, say, maybe 25 years ago in terms of traffic calming. So most communities that we work with in the area of traffic calming tend to have a minimum threshold just to ensure that there is at least community interest, because I think it behooves the municipality to make sure that if it's going to invest in the application of traffic calming measures, because there is a cost and there are implications, that there be some general community support for the individuals who live on the street of implementing traffic calming. So we always recommend a threshold number, and it will vary depending on sort of the strength of the community's interest in the topic. Some areas it is now 30, 35% as the sort of the cutoff. The other thing that we've done in some communities where there's a higher density development, where there is typically more apathy, just tends to be the case, we will adjust the rate down lower to accommodate for those sorts of situations. So there's nothing technically, there's no technical reason why we've selected 25%. We've done it on the basis that we felt that at least a quarter of the people who live on the street should at least participate, and that more than half of them should be in support of moving forward. So the municipality could adopt a policy now with those thresholds, assess them over time to see if you're getting that sort of response rate, and then you could adjust the policy over time. So we think it's a reasonable place to start in terms of setting a threshold for at least minimal community involvement to make sure they're involved. We have seen some situations recently. We've done some work recently in Peterborough, whereby they didn't get the minimum target largely because that actually happened to be an area where there were a number of higher density residential buildings. So in that particular case, what they decided to do is implement education and enforcement measures, which didn't entail physical traffic calming installation, and agreed that they would monitor the changes over a year, and then they would consider polling the community to see if things had changed over time. So there's definitely mechanisms available to the municipality. If you're uncomfortable or you have some reservations about the certain threshold, you could look at putting in place the opportunity to go back and reassess it after a period of time. So in that particular case in Peterborough, we were looking at 4 neighborhoods. We were looking at 5 neighborhoods. 4 of the 5 met the minimum threshold. The one that didn't, the council agreed that they would just monitor for the next year and then go back and repoll. So I think there are opportunities available to the municipality to have some flexibility. It's really a guideline council can choose if they are not satisfied with a response rate or with the type of response that they're getting to supersede the policy if that's something that you desired. Not recommended, but it is certainly within your purview to do so. So I guess that was going to answer the other question about the collector roads. So typically what we do is recognizing that collector roads play a different function than local roads. So the expectation is that a collector road by its very nature is intended to convey some through traffic, because you need to connect from a higher order or a busier road to the more local roads, and there needs to be that conduit to do so. So typically in most communities, most municipalities, there is a differentiation between those two types of roads. And it's acknowledged that there's going to be different characteristics of the roadways. So in the case of a collector roadway, individuals who live on a collector roadway are typically informed that that roadway plays a different function and that it isn't going to be the same as a local roadway. So they have to expect that there are going to be different traffic characteristics. So that's why it plays out in the manner it does. Something that we've done in some communities is we've looked at the polling results separated by whether the individual, the respondent, lived on the street or lived on the adjacent street to see what sort of influence, whether there was a difference in the types of responses. So that's one way to monitor to see if the adjacent side streets are having more influence over the main collector roadway. So there's ways in which to deal with that. If council so wished to do that, or the municipality wanted to head in that direction. But we think that there should be a differentiation between the two different types of roadways, so that there's an acknowledgement for those people that do live on the local roads, the courts, the crescents, those sorts of things, that they aren't expected to experience the same level of traffic as people that live on collector roadways. Not that would be condoning any improper behavior of people who drive on collector roadways. Everyone should obey the speed limits, do their part, but the level of traffic is slightly different for collector versus local roadway. And I think, Your Worship, you also asked the question about how they deal with polling. Typically, it's done through some sort of mail out and return, because then the municipality controls the distribution to the affected property owner. So one goes to each registered property owner on the assessment roll, and then it's a simple sort of check back, check off, and return. We also did it. We also did it so you could also have the option of doing it online in some locations. So you're provided with a code. You're sent a code, and you enter that code, and you enter it. You do it online through that sort of mechanism. So I think there's a variety of different techniques that are available. We wouldn't necessarily recommend just having it sort of as an open poll on the website, because you really don't control who is responding. You want to make sure that it is the residents of the affected street that are making their views known.
Councillor Strakian?
Through you, Madam Mayor. Thank you very much. I don't envy anybody looking at speeding and so on in our community, our municipality, because it's complex. The county roads make it more complicated. Your last point sort of got me thinking about what it means to be in the neighborhood of a road. I live off a county road. My road that I live on is not a traffic issue. It's a dead-end road and so on. But how I use that county road is different than I wouldn't be assessed as necessarily a resident of that road. So there's complexities to that. When my kids get on the bus, I see the traffic differently than when I'm driving in my car. So, but that was my comment. It was a comment, but it wasn't the one that I wanted to focus on. Are you able to go back one slide on this one, please? So I guess under the traffic calming measures, to the mayor's point about the speed of certain roads and so on, and where traffic calming measures would apply, when I guess when I look at a lot of these ones, in cases where the speeds would be over, I guess, the 50 kilometer per hour threshold, when you start getting into the higher speeds, most of those wouldn't be appropriate to use, I think, for the higher speeds, is the way I'm reading this. And that, looking at, speed display devices and targeted education campaigns, I mean, those ones could probably be used anywhere. But the vast majority of these would only be applicable at lower speeds. Is that a fair assessment of that list? Is that how it should be interpreted?
Through your worship to the councillor, I think it's a fair characterization in general. Typically on higher speed roads, anything that's not a physical change to the roadway, so a hump or a bump type of thing, would be appropriate. So you see there's a number of pavement marking type treatments. Typically you see them, actually, I was driving around today sort of on my way to the meeting, and I've noticed that the county has been using some of those sorts of types of pavement marking measures in certain locations to draw drivers' attention to upcoming stop signs, things of that nature. So typically those pavement marking types of measures are used on an entry to a hamlet or another sort of built-up area that sort of appears on a county road, as an example. So those sorts of pavement markings, signing, any of those types of measures could be used on higher speed roadways, and that's tends to be their most limited application, and usually on, as I said, on the entry to a built-up area. is typically where they're used.
To indicate a transition, a change is about to happen kind
Correct.
of thing.
Yeah.
I think one of the areas that we receive a lot of comments and complaints on are the roads that are throughout the municipality where they are around 80 kilometers per hour, but because they're such wide open roads, given our rural landscape, people aren't going 80, and that's where some of the issues are. So, you know, how to address those kinds of concerns, separating the fact that some of them are county roads and so on, but just that that's a significant issue that's been raised, so. Yeah, I don't have a question. It was more so just the general comment about that some of those traffic calming measures aren't necessarily about the transition zones, but just about the roads themselves, allowing for greater speed. So, thank you.
So maybe we can just break it out because we've been discussing traffic calming. Are there any other comments from council before we move on to, I think, speed reduction, right? Okay. To Councillor Strachan's point, I think we're very hopeful for a Made in North Grenville strategy, if you will, where there is a recognition of some of those tensions on rural roads, and to Councillor's point, a lot of them, they're long stretches, right? So, and we have heard from a lot, I would say we've heard from as many rural residents as we've heard from urban residents, if not more, in terms of concerns. Smith Road being, I think, right, one of those examples of a really long road with varying features, increasing residential intensification, much of it 80, right? I think there's going to be some modifications, which is great to hear, but I think we do have to get our heads around what does it look like on those roads, right? Certainly speed reduction could potentially facilitate traffic calming to some extent, but I'm sort of concerned about what happens in a 60-kilometer zone where you could see the merits of some traffic calming to really disrupt that notion that you can sort of go 80 all the way because the road looks good. And I don't know if these policies fully capture that at this point or not. Perhaps we'll have to kind of see how it plays out. Mr. Rowe, did you want to add something?
I was just going to note that, don't quote me on these numbers, but I would say about at least 50% of the ones in the last year have been rural roadways.
I think making the point that much stronger that we sort of have to get our heads around. And I don't know if one of the solutions to give our staff flexibility is to not cut it off at 50, right? Maybe, and again, I accept your point that traffic calming is largely used for urban areas where maybe the features of the road, are more conducive to traffic calming elements, but I worry about what we take off the table if we keep the 50K in there as a disqualifying feature, right? If you have any road above 50 kilometers an hour, we're basically saying that traffic calming doesn't apply, and I'm not sure that works here.
I think it's a fair comment, Your Worship. I will make a few clarifying notes. Up until the previous version of the Canadian Guide to Neighborhood Traffic Calming didn't at all deal with rural roads. It was recognized when the guide was first developed in 1998 that there needed to be guidance in urban areas because that's where most of the traffic calming was happening. But there was also an acknowledgement that the options and different methods in rural areas are not plentiful, unfortunately, because you have to sort of balance the risk and the reward, because anytime you start to introduce physical measures into a roadway where there's an operating speed of 70, 80 kilometers per hour, it heightens the risk of a more severe outcome if a driver was to lose control or was to hit the device. And obviously you want people traveling that fast in the first place, or else you wouldn't be doing it. But you do have to have regard from a liability perspective to keep that in mind as well. Not suggesting that's a reason to not consider something, but it's a trade-off that you have to think about as you move forward with that.
Okay, so then maybe we'll move on to speed reduction then for the present time.
Certainly, thank you very much. So the second policy was originally intended to deal with speed limits solely, but we felt there was a useful opportunity to also integrate the municipality's community safety zone policy with the speed limit policy review. because there is a correlation between the two in terms of looking at them as a complementary set of policy tools to be able to achieve improved safety on roadways. So like the traffic calming policy, this is an update to an existing adopted policy direction. And we've again taken the opportunity to sort of restructure it, but carry forward elements that were appropriate from the previous version of the speed limit policy. So we've structured it into sort of a similar sort of document as the traffic calming, with the 5 sections that have been noted on the slide. So the current policy that the municipality has was adopted in November of 2010. And it's based on a document, another Transportation Association of Canada guideline document for establishing posted speed limits, which still to this day is the generally recommended practice for municipalities in the country. There hasn't been a more recent version of the document produced. There has been some more research in the United States recently, but it tends to be somewhat similar to this practice that's been recommended and tends to be the procedure that most municipalities in the country follow. The current policy also assumes the default speed limits within the Highway Traffic Act, which is 50 kilometers per hour for urban roads, which can be reduced to 40 km, the 80 kilometer for rural roads, which can be reduced to 50 kilometers for subdivisions, and 40 for school zones. So that was consistent with the Highway Traffic Act prior to the introduction of the area-wide speed limits, and it tended to be the prevailing direction that the municipality followed in setting speed limits. In the recent past, in the last year, the municipality has made some attempts to adjust its speed limit policies within the more urban areas of the municipality in Kempfield, Equinell, and in the Temple subdivision, and is now in the process of installing in all the rural residential areas the area-wide 40 kilometer per hour speed limits. So that's what's in effect today. In terms of the community safety zone policy, it was established in 2013, and it sets out 3 warrants that must be satisfied. First one being around the areas of special consideration, if there's an identified safety concern, and the police service's ability to enforce the restriction are the guiding factors that determine where community safety zones would be considered. So what we've recommended in terms of updates, again, is similar to the traffic calming, is revising the process for receiving, evaluating, responding to citizen requests. And one of the things that, in our conversations with Mr. Bro and Public Works staff about the use of the intake process is, as opposed to people coming to you with a solution, saying, I want a speed limit reduction, I want a speed hump, what we've recommended is that you look at the process as to what is the preferred, identify what the issue is, and then identify the preferred approach, as opposed to saying, it's a speed limit or it's not a speed limit, it's a speed hump or it's not a speed hump. Look at what the best way of dealing with it, as opposed to defaulting to what the individual has requested, because there might be a better tool to achieve what they're trying to accomplish than what they sort of know in their minds as a potential solution. So what we've also done is we've updated the evaluation methodology and checklist for undertaking speed limit assessments, still relying on the TAC guidelines where they're appropriate, but recommending default speed limits in all built up in urban areas within the municipality of 40 kilometers per hour and 80 kilometers per hour outside the urban area designations. And we haven't proposed any changes to the criteria and guidelines for community safety zones, recognizing that there isn't really a lot of opportunities within the municipality for the additional designation of community safety zones, and that the criteria and guidelines are still appropriate today. Again, a flow chart that's difficult to see on the screen, but in essence sets out a 6-step process for involving the community and a technical assessment process to come up with a way of addressing speed limit requests.
So I
yeah.
just have a couple questions.
Yeah,
So
certainly.
Thank you, and I appreciate this. But again, the municipality will maintain the statutory 80 kilometers an hour speed limit on all municipal roads, right? Except where municipal roads are within the area of influence of a county road, right, with unfavorable geometric characteristics and design speeds of 90 kilometers or less. I think I'm reading that right? Right, these are the exceptions to an 80-kilometer status quo or adjacent to a designated school zone. So I guess once again, I'm just sort of struggling because we know that many of the speed complaints we're getting are on 80-kilometer-hour roads, and I don't think the proposals here really allow for many adjustments. Am I reading the policy incorrectly in terms of the capacity for the municipality to look very specifically, you know, Smith Road being that example, where does it qualify for speed reductions?
Yeah, it's probably best that I'll make this statement is in our testing phase of the policy, the area that has been favoring the lower speeds is actually the second condition where we're utilizing the TAC guidelines to determine what the appropriate speed. So a significant amount of the requests that have been brought forth are recommending a lowered speed limit based on the second condition where we're using the Canadian guidelines for establishing posted speeds to lower those limits.
Okay, so that doesn't speak to one of the three criteria in bold, or it does? So when you say the TAC guidelines, are you speaking to the things that are defined here? For example, unfavorable geometric characteristics, is that what you mean?
Exactly.
Okay,
Yeah.
so you're really looking at the characteristics of the road? Right?
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, but you really need the road to not be sort of a straight, long road, right, in order to trigger something, or is there more nuance there in terms of what you see?
It's not necessarily simply the geometry of the road, and
Okay.
perhaps Jean can comment as well, but it does take into consideration the class of the road, the facilities that are on the road, whether it be pedestrian or cycling facilities, that type of thing, number of intersections with other roadways, number of private accesses, that those are all considered in the.
So I'm hearing that there's some flexibility there, sort of built, I mean, it may not be as obvious to us, we're not experts
Yeah.
in this, right? So I'm just sort of trying to read, where does this policy allow for some capacity to respond, right? And I know there's a tension between, you know, 80% of people following the speed limit and 20% not, and they're kind of the outliers, and they create chaos for everyone because people then start to feel like they can't walk on their rural road, right? And no, Deputy Mayor has experienced this directly in terms of how do you navigate yourself on a rural road, whether you're walking it or driving it. So I think we just want to be confident that there's enough to work with so that we can respond appropriately.
From what I have seen in the through the testing phase,
Yeah.
I believe that we do have that ability.
Okay. And I see Councillor Strachan, go ahead.
Through you, Madam Mayor. With this process that's on the screen right now, there's one block in there that talks to or speaks to the have circumstances or conditions changed. Could you clarify? I'm assuming I know what that means, but I guess could you clarify what that the intent is behind that block?
Yeah, thank you for the question through you, Madam Mayor. That step in the process is intended to avoid sort of recurring requests if an individual or a neighborhood doesn't get the answer they want the first time. So the expectation is that the municipality would follow a standard process if they receive a request, which would comprise the technical evaluation, as Mr. Breaux was speaking about, as well as other considerations of the policy. Once that initial test is done and it doesn't warrant a speed limit reduction based on that assessment, then it helps to avoid people resubmitting requests within a period of time. We've selected I believe it's 3 years. I think that's what it says. 3 years. That was what we felt was an appropriate period of time for change to occur within a community, such that a reassessment would have merit. But for someone to receive a response that it's not warranted and then come back the next day and ask for it again, we felt was burdensome on municipal resources and didn't feel that it was an appropriate use of staff time and council's consideration. Council can choose, if it wishes, to direct staff to, to reassess a location if it's within that 3-year time period. But we're just putting it there as sort of a fail-safe to avoid recurring requests.
So I appreciate the 3 years, and I understand why that would be in there. I guess the question that I have is more to the point of circumstances and conditions. So we have an area that we reduced, I mean, it's on the county road, but went from 80 to a zone that is 60 kilometers per hour. And I believe that a lot of the circumstances that have changed is the high growth in the community. So Rideau River Road has seen an extreme increase in traffic. And therefore that area, the residents, the houses haven't changed location, the road hasn't changed, nothing really else has happened other than the increase in traffic. So would that be an example of circumstances or conditions changing that would warrant that review? I'm just looking for some examples of what would be considered appropriate circumstances or conditions changing enough.
Through you, Madam Mayor, it was intended to be a bit flexible to enable staff and council to consider different conditions, but the example that you provided is a perfect one where, just overall traffic growth has increased, so the operating characteristics of the roadway have changed, and it's prudent and appropriate for the municipality to reconsider its posted speed limit there. So that's a really good example.
Okay, thank you.
A change in volumes would override that stipulated 3-year waiting period. Okay. So on speed reduction, before we move on, I don't see a proposed residential survey, as is the case for traffic calming. Is that correct? The speed reduction analysis really rests on a technical analysis and on some contextual factors. Is that my understanding? Okay.
That is correct in terms of what we've recommended.
Okay.
Yeah.
And why, just quickly, why the difference? Why would we survey residents on traffic calming, right? Which is intended to basically slow people down, but not survey people on speed reductions? And I think I know the answer to that question, but I'd like to benefit from your answer.
Certainly, thank you very much. So in our view, the process to assess a speed limit is a technical process, and it isn't any different than a stop sign consideration. There's a technical process for staff and for council to consider. It sets out guidelines, and it shouldn't be a matter of debate as to whether people want or don't want a speed limit change from that perspective. Traffic calming, though, is different in that there are no prescribed recommended guidelines for the installation of a speed hump, as an example. It doesn't say if you meet a certain threshold. So it does have a lot more, and the other aspect of it is that the implementation of traffic calming usually is something that's physical or has long-term potential impacts on the community. Obviously a speed limit sign, people should be obeying the speed limit sign, but doesn't have the same sort of impact from a physical nature that a traffic calming plan has. So it's felt that, that the community should have more say in something of that nature, whereby a speed limit change is more of a technical process, and people still have the opportunity, if the speed limit change isn't recognized, to still explore the traffic calming path.
Thank you. So anything else on speed reduction, council colleagues? Because I think soon we'll be moving. Okay, good, thanks.
So the third policy is with respect to trucks and truck routing. The municipality doesn't currently have a policy with regards to truck route policy. It does have some references to where trucks can and can't operate in some select roadways within bylaws that date back, in some cases, 25 years. So there isn't currently a consistent policy framework for the consideration of truck operation on municipal roadways. So this is a new policy direction for the municipality that's in essence looking to set up where trucks should typically operate and should not operate. And that's really the essence of the truck route policy. So we set out in the policy document a proposed truck route network, how to sign it, how to be taking trucks and freight movement into consideration in the planning process, because obviously if you can deal with it earlier on, it's much more effective than having to deal with the situation after development occurs or redevelopment occurs, things of that nature. And we've provided a framework for a potential truck route bylaw based on a template from other municipalities in the province. So as mentioned, the recommended policy sets out a preferred truck route network. It sets out a roadway signing strategy for setting out those truck routes networks, provides a list of some supporting measures that deal with changes to infrastructure and education and enforcement. As mentioned, provides some guidance in planning in terms of coordinating land use and transportation and ensuring proper vehicle circulation and loading facilities in development, and as mentioned, the template for the truck route bylaw. Now, the concept for the truck route, there's different strategies that municipalities use to establish preferred locations for truck routing. And you do need to take into consideration that, albeit there are some negative impacts of truck usage on more sensitive land uses, it is important for the commerce of the municipality and economic development that trucking does have access to appropriate areas, because the vast majority of goods that move into and out of North Grenville are carried by truck. So it's kind of important for local businesses as well as the residents in the community to have access. So you're sort of walking this line, trying to balance the needs of trucking and the concerns of the community. And typically what we try to do in these cases is look at using the higher order roads, so the more well-designed isn't the right word, but the roads that are more designed for accommodation of trucks, as well as those facilities that go longer distances. So what we've recommended is that you use primarily the county and provincial road system to accommodate the truck routing, and that the municipality pursue a primarily permissive signing system, whereby you use the green circle truck signs as opposed to the red circle truck signs to guide trucks to the preferred routing, as opposed to signing all of the streets where you don't want trucks. So it helps to eliminate sign pollution to a certain extent. It also acknowledges that under the Highway Traffic Act, trucks can operate on any municipal roadway if it has a destination or an origin along that roadway. Despite there being a red circle on the roadway, if it's the only way in and out for the truck, it still has the right to operate on the roadway. So it acknowledges that sort of nuance. I think that's important. And it's consistent with what the county's been doing in terms of signing some of the truck routing in town already. In Kempfield, they've done that in a couple of locations using the green circles and supplementing it with the red circle cross out in locations where you don't want trucks to be operating. So we're continuing on with that practice, which is actually consistent with the abutting City of Ottawa as well as the counties to the east as well. So what we're showing here in this exhibit is the recommended truck route network, which are the blue lines. A little faint to see, but the idea is that we've identified primarily on county roads and provincial highways. There is one section of municipal road that we've identified that makes sense from a continuity perspective, a short section of Guy Road that's intended to provide some continuity. And other than that, it's all on, the routes are all identified on county roads or on provincial highways. We've also provided a signing strategy to identify locations where you guide trucks to the truck route network. So they're primarily at provincial highway interchange locations, as well as entries into and out of the municipality to provide guidance to trucks as to what routes they're supposed to travel on. So there's examples of the signs that are included in the report. So with that, happy to answer any questions on the truck route policy.
I can go ahead first because I have been corresponding with a resident in regards to some concerns about River Road. Not surprisingly, again, to Councillor Strachan's point, we've seen a lot of residential intensification of certain areas of River Road closer to Kempfield. And then on the other hand, we've seen a busier road, but not necessarily because of residential intensification right on that street, but because of that county road, but just because of the growth in North Granville. So the point and the question that was posed to me that I'd like to pose to you is River Road and parts of 416 run almost exactly in parallel up to a certain point. A lot of our county roads are residential roads, so I accept that, yes, they're kind of built to a different standard to accommodate, a wider variety of traffic, but I am curious about why we wouldn't propose more of a network that relies on the 416, right? And of course, people have to get off the 416. Nobody's denying that if you have a destination, then at some point you have to get off whatever highway or road you are on in order to go to your destination. But given the fact that the 416 so closely hugs parts of our community, I am curious as to why parts of River Road closer to the community of Kempfield would remain on this list. I also have concerns about Van Buren, right? Also a county road, heavily residential. I don't see that Van Buren has been taken off this list. I may be mistaken. You can correct me, but I do have some concerns about this de facto reliance on county roads or de facto acceptance of county roads as naturally suited to truck routes, because I'm not sure that's always the case in our community.
Thank you for the question, and it's a good question, Madam Mayor, in terms of sort of the rationale. So I think one of the principles of this is that we're again trying that balance between accommodating truck routing and protecting sensitive land use areas. But we were trying to achieve some continuity over distance of some of the routes, and the expectation that that there would be a route. But I think you bring up a really good point about River Road and whether it is actually a necessary or even actually might be redundant, given the fact that you've got the 416 and another adjacent county road. So I think that makes some sense to reconsider that potential linkage, because it doesn't really serve an additional purpose. Exactly. So I think it makes some sense to reconsider that one. What we were looking for, as I said, was some continuity over length. So there's the section by the Colonnade commercial area that that continues down. So we saw that as a longer distance connection. But yeah, I think you make a very good point, and the residents that brought that forward also make a very good point as well. That I think it can be reconsidered. And I think your point about the county roads de facto, one of the things that we tried to do was avoid that in some locations, because you'll see that there are certain sections of county road that we haven't recommended. For example, 19 coming in on Clothier Street. We didn't recommend that because it really doesn't connect to anything. So that's why we recommended that little piece of Guy Road, because it actually connected to something, connected a couple things together, and it was strategically located. So I think it's fair to say that not every county road needs to be a truck route, because they can operate there by default, but it's not where we want to encourage trucks to operate. So we definitely would be receptive to reconsidering that particular section of River Road. I think in retrospect, it makes some sense not to have it as a duplicate.
Great. I certainly appreciate that reconsideration. I obviously align with you. Can you speak about Van Buren, right? Is all of Van Buren, I'm sorry, I'm not looking closely at the maps, are we tolerating Van Buren? I mean, we have site plan proposals coming for potentially 150 new homes, right, on parts of Van Buren or just off of Van Buren. So again, another, road that's somewhat internal to the municipality. Understood, people have to, absolutely no one is contesting that at a certain point a truck has to get off the road to meet a destination. So can someone speak to the rationale for Van Buren not being a no truck area?
Yeah,
So
24.
basically, that's just at the southern portion of the municipality.
So it's this section right here.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, it's so one of the considerations for Van Buren was that coming from the south, the road would just sort of dump off into Kempfield. There would be no way to route it back to the provincial highway, and that is actually the routing that's in place today, that the county has established to avoid trucks traveling through the heart of Kempfield. So it's a way to route them around. So that the rationale is that there wouldn't be a alternative for them to get around Kempfield without having to go through. So it makes sense from that perspective. It connects back to County Road 43, provides access to the Highway 416. So it makes a lot of sense from a network connectivity perspective. I appreciate that it may not be fully aligned with sort of the development that's occurring now, but from a network perspective, I think it's a relatively important piece of the network to avoid, trucks ending up sort of stuck with having like where they go through Kempfield. And definitely don't want that. And it's been in effect for a number of years, and it was sort of the origins of the municipality's truck prohibitions. So we thought it still made sense to continue it forward.
And will increased volumes or increased residential intensification, or the fact that I think parts of it are a 40-kilometer road, if I'm not mistaken, and I hear what you're saying, so, you need to have a network, so I appreciate that. But the fact that it would potentially remain a truck route, does it negate, for example, as I think it might, any traffic calming measures, right? Because I think we noted in traffic calming measures, if it's a truck route, you can't even make, that effort to slow people down through traffic calming. Is that the case?
Maybe Jean can speak to the conditions that would negate it. I don't recall any conditions from a truck routing. It is definitely a consideration that we would move forward. But
right, but it is a 40-kilometer area. So I think to your point, like, how do you balance, obviously, the need for connectivity with the fact that I think we're going to see continuing residential intensification, and what do you do with that, right?
It's a fair point, Madam Mayor. Again, it's one of these ones where there's this tension between, that there needs to be some connectivity, there needs to be roadways that carry a broader variety of vehicle types, and it at the expense of other things. Now, there are less intrusive traffic calming measures, line markings, signs, speed limits, things of that nature that could help to mitigate to a certain extent. But, it's pretty tough to get sort of downtown Kempfield without having that link in there. And I think it's important from that perspective, where you run the risk of, vehicles, permeating through the downtown core, which is undesirable.
Colleagues, Councillor O'Sullivan, please.
Thank you. I do have a comment, question. I completely agree with the limiting truck traffic on County Road 19, because when you see on the map up there that there's no real place where the trucks are coming from or getting to that they couldn't use 416. I've received as many complaints, or probably as many at least as Mayor Peckford has, regarding the number of large trucks that are coming down County Road 19 between the 416 at the river, at Rideau River Road, and when they're getting off when they get to Kempfield. So I don't understand why they would get off 416, use that road, and then get back on 416, I assume. So I don't know why, but it's happening. And the other concern then is when they do get to County Road 43, they're either going west on 43, or they're going east and getting back on 416. I don't know. But if they do cross 43, it says County Road 19. If you're using a GPS or any maps that way in a vehicle, County Road 19 / Wellington Road are identified. It says Wellington Road is County Road 19. It says that on my vehicle, and it's not. It's not a county road. And so trucks that are using that end up coming down Wellington Road thinking it's County Road 19, unless, of course, they're trucks that do know the area and know it's not. But this is left over from a time that I believe Wellington Road may have been County Road 19. But it's not updated, because I have a car that's not 30 years old, and that's not been a county road for a long time. So that's one concern that I don't know how we address that. I've brought it to attention of Nissan, for example, where my car is from, and they say it's not in their hands to change the maps. The other issue is that we have a major truck center on Colonnade Road, and all the trucks that go and leave that destination have to go through a shopping mall or a commercial place that's strictly commercial with very limited sidewalks in it. So that's a problem. And then also the Rush Collision Center is on Van Buren. So to get to and from Van Buren, or to and from that collision center, they have to travel on Van Buren. But if there was another access to the truck center on Colonnade Road off of County Road 19 without going straight through the mall, it would be a big improvement.
I can speak a little bit to the secondary access. I believe it was a recommendation in the transportation master plan for that secondary access onto 19. I believe it was in the phase 3, so more of a longer term recommendation based on the connections that are already there, as well as the costing. But it has been considered for sure, and it is moving forward at some point, or recommended to move forward at some point.
Yeah, I realize that. I do know that. So is there anything that can be done, though, about identification of what county roads are and truck mapping? I believe that there is Ontario truck route guide. Is that? Okay. So how can we get that changed for them? Is there anything we can do?
We can definitely, I believe we have investigated contacting them to get their mapping updated. Jean, I'm not sure if you've had any experience with that mapping system. Okay, so we can definitely follow up with that for sure. I don't recall where that ended previously, but we can definitely follow up.
Sorry, if you're using Google Maps and you come up 43, when you get to the traffic circle at McEwen's Gas at County Road 19, it does say that you're going to turn left onto Wellington Road, but it's not. It's County Road 19, and Wellington Road is further down, and when you get to Wellington Road, and it says turn right on Wellington Road / County Road 19. So it's wrong there, and I'm sure that's not the only place, but it's a potential confusing part for any truckers who are new to the area.
Councillor Strakian?
Through you, Madam Mayor, a question regarding connectivity to other municipalities. So obviously, City of Ottawa is the one that I'm looking at here when we look at County Road 19. So when we go past the 416 from Kempfield, and so you're heading north, is the portion of Rideau River Road, which becomes River Road when you get into Ottawa and so on, is that's a designated truck route on the City of Ottawa side, I would assume, and that it comes into here. And if that's the case, then would we be, I guess, required to keep ours as a truck route because it would be that same road following through to the 416?
Through you, Madam Mayor, there'd be no obligation for the municipality to continue it on. I think, there's a natural sort of break, there where it gets to 416 and the county road preceding it. So I think there's a way to, to manage that. So there is continuity.
Yeah, there's a challenge with the part that's beyond the 416 because that was part of the reason behind reducing the speed to 60 kilometers per hour was because of the truck traffic that was literally shaking shelves and houses because the houses are so close to the road. So it was linked to truck route as well. The reduction in speed accomplished that, but it kind of is part of that same sort of story about that stretch of road as well. So I'm just wondering if where the City of Ottawa or connecting to other roads could be used as an example, but for that for the case of River Road, because it is connected to the City of Ottawa, that if they have an existing truck route and then we were to stop it at our boundary, there's a discontinuity there that wouldn't make any sense. So I guess I was just wondering what our obligation is on our end of things because of that.
Maybe if I could just add, Madam Mayor, we did look at the City of Ottawa's mapping as well as the adjacent counties to see where things tied together, and the locations where we've identified where the routes are coming into North Grenville from the north line with the city's mapping.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
I think, though, in the case of River Road, where we're suggesting directing truck traffic onto the 416, it literally is a parallel route right into North Grenville. So yes, it provides a bit of a disruption, but it's fairly minor.
Sorry, Madam Mayor, my point wasn't for this section between 416 and Kempfield. It was for the point beyond that, where we created the 60 kilometers per hour and that route continuing there. So it was more so just where the continuity is and so on. That part I completely appreciate that.
But to your point, I guess the question is, where would that no truck route part start, right? Because I'm not sure where, I think it would start at that 416 juncture, if I'm not mistaken, not go beyond, right beyond that point. Okay. Other questions, Councillor Barkley?
Yeah, I've got a couple of comments, but they're more general, not necessarily related to truck routes. But just to pick up on what the concern that Councillor O'Sullivan had, I know as part of our road safety strategy, we talk about public communication pieces. We've got some brochures, etc. Just to follow up on her question, how do we communicate outside of the municipality our truck routes, especially that GPS is now, so prevalent? So is part of what we need to do is to get that information about our truck routes to those organizations that might publish it or update their routes? I think there's a good case to be said that, given Councillor O'Sullivan's experience, that's something we should be doing.
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor, it's actually one of the recommendations is to have having an education and communication component as part of it. And we've made a few suggestions on where you can share that information. So through the Ontario Trucking Association, through service centers like where trucks congregate, things of that nature are ways to do it. Simply as putting it on the municipality's website is an example of another thing that can be done. So there's some suggestions that we've included in the report about helping with education and communication. But there certainly is, I've done a few of these over the years, and it's truly surprising what drives some of the decisions that drivers make in terms of why they select certain routes. It wouldn't be something that you would necessarily think of. In some cases, we've had ones where when we surveyed, there were gravel truck drivers, we surveyed them about why they were using it just as opposed to an alternative route, and it was simply because they got to see people on this one route as opposed to they don't see people all day long on another route. You know, those sorts of decisions are very difficult to sort of logically sort of deal with. So, so anything you can do to help communicate and engage with the trucking association would certainly help.
Okay, two more. In the traffic calming intake process and speed limit intake process, one is 6 steps, the other is 5 steps. I don't know if it's possible, but I'm asking if we could take a look at that, because we're living in a community where people do come to council and do come to staff and say, we'd like a stop sign here. Now we're introducing, they have a traffic concern form, which is fairly simple, and the process, I think, is a little, there are fewer steps in the process. Is there any way to streamline that intake process? Instead of 6 steps, 5 steps, instead of 5 steps, 4 steps, is there, I guess it's a request, you know, to take a look at it again and see if we can simplify the process. And I'm really asking on behalf of the residents who are really going to have to understand the process and why it's necessary. I think it would be an easier selling job to the community if it was somewhat simpler.
Through the mayor to Councillor, it's a fair point, Councillor, in terms of trying to simplify. We tried our best to try to simplify as much, because those are the steps you kind of have to go through. Like, and we tried to simplify it to the extent we could. You know, from the residents' perspective, you know, the intake is relatively, I think it's relatively painless. You have to submit a request that the municipality considers. So it just ensures that, especially from staff's perspective, that there's a consistent way in which these things come to them as opposed to coming all over the different places. And I appreciate that may not be as simple as some people would like it to be, but at least it helps, I guess, ensure some consistency that they're all being dealt with in an appropriate manner, as opposed to some may perceive that if they're brought in from one way, they get dealt with differently than if they come in from another way. So what we were intending to do is try to streamline the process from staff's perspective, make sure that the community knows that this is the process that they follow to make it happen. And I can appreciate that some people will perceive it to be additional bureaucracy, but I think given sort of the volume of requests you get and that there needs to be due diligence on each one that's received, I think it's prudent to have some sort of process.
I don't want to put the burden on you to adjust the process. It's just, it really falls on the municipality to do an effective communication piece.
Right.
Where someone might request a stop sign and then ask, when is the stop sign going to be installed, without understanding that a process is necessary.
Right.
So in that communication piece, if there's any way of simplifying it, but I trust what you're saying, that it's, all the steps are there and they're necessary. Yeah. The final comment or question I have is really asking for some advice. We're a lower tier municipality. We deal with county roads. So we have some obstacles in implementing such things like the gateway signage program in hamlets. We're leaving that to the end. You know, we've chosen the low-hanging fruit to implement this policy, the gateway signage policy. Do you have any advice about how to negotiate or stick handle our way through upper tier level of government that may not see the urgency that we see and may have a different way of dealing with things?
Through the mayor to the councillor, it's not uncommon. So maybe I'll start there. That this sort of relationship is not uncommon in Ontario, and I would actually hazard to say that you have moved the United Counties further than I think some other counties in the province and regional municipalities have gone. So I think, you know, I know it probably is a degree of frustration that it's not the same sort of simplicity that it might be in dealing with at the lower tier level, but I think they've moved in some ways. But I think it's just this sort of what we're seeing is that there is really much more heightened awareness at all levels about the changes to traffic safety. So I'm seeing things happening at regional level government that I wouldn't have seen 5 years ago, like in terms of them considering 40K zones and considering community safety zones. And so I think it's going to happen, it's happening in terms of that there's a changing mindset around it. And I think continuing to communicate with them and using these sorts of documents that are in front of you, having, a stated consistent position from the municipality. You have a policy, you can bring it to county council and bring it to county staff and use that as the basis of your discussion points with the upper tier government. And I think you'll see things are going to change, they're going to continue to change over time. But I think there is some, benefit though of having that little bit of tension because there does need to be a recognition that county roads or the higher order roads serve a different purpose than local municipal roads, and that there does need to be a recognition that in some cases you do need to accommodate that other function of the roadway that isn't necessarily just serving land. So I think that's my long, convoluted way of saying that just continue doing what you're doing, and I think it's going to, they'll continue to evolve over time.
Deputy Mayor, did you raise your hand? No? Okay. I think we're nearing the end here. So, Councillor Barkley, did you have one more? Okay. And I would say that I think the counties, United Counties, has been fairly, if not remarkably receptive in certain cases to lowering speeds. And in other cases, they're, I think, feeling their own obligations and commitments to maintain county roads for certain purposes. And that conflict, which is, I think, what we're seeing a lot in North Granville, quite frankly, is hard to resolve. So obviously this policy or set of policies means a lot to us because, to Councillor Barkley's point, I do think we need to see some additional movement. And, this is an important guidance document. I just have one more question, and it's just to help me understand. You have proposed a 50-kilometer-an-hour speed limit within rural hamlets. Now, how does except where there are 3 conditions apply? We just heard a presentation, you were in the room for it, in Burris Rapids, where they're proposing 40-kilometer speed limits and 30, right, on sort of side roads, if you will, for lack of a better term. Is there incompatibility then in terms of hamlet speeds and what Burris, as an example of one hamlet, intends to do or is expressing to us their wish to make happen?
Yeah, definitely. There could be that perceived discontinuity between the hamlets. The way I have understood it through Jean as well as Kim is that the intention of the 30 in Burris Rapids on the side roads as well as the 40 on the main strip was to support the other recommendations as well. So by no means I don't believe that we would have this document supersede that more detailed plan of the hamlet. I would think this is more of an umbrella. This is what our hamlets will be, and then should we go through that more detailed assessment of the hamlets, there are potential for further lowering the speed limits. I believe you mentioned at the beginning there that the recommendation was for 50 kilometers per hour in our rural hamlets. Jean, maybe you can speak to that. I believe I read it was 40 actually.
Yes.
In our rural hamlets.
Yes, Madam Mayor. And anywhere that's built up, so anything that is denoted in your official plan as a built-up area is recommended to be 40.
Okay.
So there is also a provision within the policy to contemplate 30 K zones in specific circumstances, primarily in schools areas, community safety zones, or if you have a unprotected cycling or pedestrian facility in those particular locations, it contemplates a 30K provision, or if there's specific geometry of the roadway that makes it less safe to operate at 40.
Okay. So what I'm seeing on page 4, the municipality will maintain the statutory 50-kilometer-an-hour speed limit on municipal roads within rural hamlets and rural residential areas. Is incorrect? So this is page 4 under 3.2, urban areas. I'm very happy with 40, so I will let that stand. I just want to make sure that I'm not reading it incorrectly. It's just the speed reduction policy?
So I guess, Madam Mayor, I'm looking at page 4, and under the urban areas, it's recommended that the municipality enact 40K speed limits on all municipal roads in built-up urban areas.
Okay.
Designated on Schedule A of the official plan. So that includes urban service area, hamlets, and rural residential.
The specifics of this policy came from what was shared with us via the Police Services Board. So maybe that was an older.
Potentially, that was definitely an older version, so there
Okay.
were potentially more.
I accept what you're saying. Great. Perfect. Thank you. Okay. Colleagues, anything else? 10 to 10? Okay. We're sorry we didn't get to you earlier. We thank you for your patience. So what I take away from this is that before I looked for a mover, a seconder for a motion is there is an appetite to consider River Road, a section of River Road as a truck route. So I just want to be clear about the direction we're providing. And I still have a question about whether or not the threshold to eliminate consideration of traffic calming should be 60 or is it 50? What is the discussion? We said it had to be 50 or 60 kilometers an hour. What is the disqualifying speed to consider traffic
So
calming?
currently in the policy, there was, it is stipulated as 50 kilometers per hour. I believe we did note that we would reinvestigate that.
Okay.
I would, my thought process on that is that potentially some traffic calming measures may be not feasible on those higher speed limit roadways.
Some.
But
Yeah.
exactly, not all of them. So we'll definitely investigate that further.
Okay.
And
we're having the discussion this evening. We're adopting the policies as they are, right?
Yeah.
So at this point, if we adopt the policy without reconsidering the 50 cutoff, then we have no opportunity except to amend the policy. So I guess I'm just looking to you, and I hear you, Mr. Bro, you may be absolutely correct. Is there any rationale to give us a little more flexibility by saying 60? It would negate what you're talking about in terms of very legitimate concerns about imposing traffic calming, right, on a 60-kilometer road where really you would be creating a lack of safety, right, in certain cases. But I'm just wondering about the flexibility in terms of that threshold.
Yeah, to you, Madam Mayor, I think one way in which you could probably address this is to acknowledge that that is for urban areas, and then it sort of stands as it is in urban areas, and that come back with something for dealing with rural areas.
Okay. Mr. Broad, or is that feasible from your perspective?
definitely from my perspective, as an alternative, I may pass this off to Heather as a potential. We would be able to amend the recommendation to further investigate those items. I believe both options are available.
Okay. So Council, this is the motion before me that we receive the presentation titled Municipality of North Granville Transportation Policies.
Madam Mayor, I think we
Yes.
have more to get to. There's the road safety strategy that's still remaining.
Oh, I apologize.
Sorry.
I apologize.
Sorry for interrupting.
I apologize. Thank you for that course correct. Over to you again. Okay.
Great, I'll try to work through this quickly because I appreciate
sure.
the hour. So the final document that's before you is entitled the Road Safety Strategy. It is a different sort of animal than the other three, which are more operational in nature, tactical policies. This is more of a broader strategy. And it's intended to be a overarching guidance document that the other three policies fit within because they're more detailed in nature. This is more sort of a broader strategy for the municipality. So it sets up things like goals, objectives, visions, those sorts of things. So what is in the recommended strategy is what we have referred to as a series of emphasis areas or target or focus areas that the municipality would focus its road safety initiatives around. And then within each of the emphasis areas, there's a series of what is termed countermeasures or safety improvements or actions. So the strategy lays out 5 emphasis areas and a series of countermeasures associated with each emphasis area. And it includes some initial implementation actions, but it's really intended to provide a framework for moving forward with road safety for the municipality. And as I mentioned, the traffic calming, speed limit, and truck route policies fall within the broader strategy framework. So the vision and goals for the road safety strategy, the intent is to make North Grenville's roads safer for all users by moving towards 0 fatalities and injuries. The goals include, improving the safety for vulnerable road users, who are the most important user group that we're trying to accommodate and improve road safety for. Make it safer for road infrastructure, safer for all users, increase the public awareness about the importance of road safety, eliminate high-risk driver behaviors, move more towards a data-driven, evidence-based approach, use primarily proven countermeasures, but recognize that there may be situations where there are emerging strategies and technologies that should be considered for improving road safety. So as mentioned, there's 5 emphasis areas, and we've targeted them around sort of what we heard through the engagement. The one caveat I will put on this is that typically most municipalities, when they come up with a road safety strategy, will do a very deep dive into collision statistics and information in that regard. Unfortunately, the municipality doesn't benefit from an overly sort of robust collision database. We had information that was available to us from the OPP, and it provided interesting information and some rudimentary information, but it doesn't provide the type of detail that you would typically get into for a road safety strategy. So it helped in terms of identifying some interesting trends and some things to look forward to, but it doesn't provide necessarily the evidence-based approach that you would normally do in confirming the emphasis areas. So we flavored the emphasis areas based on what we heard through the public and stakeholder engagement as some of the priorities for the municipality, recognizing that the municipality doesn't currently have a considerable collision, a reported collision problem currently. There aren't a lot of, there are reported collisions, but they're not resulting in many serious injuries. Not that any are acceptable, but there isn't a trend that we could kind of point to and say, you got to focus on this to get rid of this type of thing. So what we've aimed the emphasis areas around are sort of what we've heard from the public and stakeholders, as well as some of the initial collision statistics that we were able to analyze. So as mentioned, we've organized them into these 5 emphasis areas of aggressive driving, distracted driving, pedestrians, cyclists, intersections, and heavy trucks, consistent with, to a certain extent, the policies that we've brought forward with, as well as I said, what we've heard from the public as some of the primary issues to deal with. So it mentioned that there are a series of countermeasures. They're really actions taken to reduce the frequency and or the severity of a collision, and then thus improving safety. We're trying to directly target collision contributing factors with the aim of addressing the underlying safety concern. There is sort of a historical approach of organizing your countermeasures around some version of the E's, so whether it be 3, 4, 5, 6, 2, whatever the number is. But we have selected the sort of 3 that seemed to make the most sense here was engineering, enforcement, and education. And there could be overlap between the respective E's with regards to road safety. And as a result, we've ended up with 34 potential countermeasures across the 5 emphasis areas, not suggesting that you proceed with all 34 countermeasures today, but that it sets in place a framework for moving forward with road safety for the municipality. This is an example of a table that's in the strategy, which lays out the different emphasis areas and potential countermeasures and their descriptions. Talks about what of the 3 E categories they fall into. We've also included a characterization based on where it applies, so whether it's location specific, whether it's overall system wide, or whether it's a comprehensive type of measure. And then we've identified the potential partners that the municipality would engage with to help implement the countermeasure. So whether that be the public health, which is a really important partner in these typically in safety programs. The police obviously plays an important role. School boards, because there are a number of measures aimed at school areas. Other levels of road authorities, so the county and MTO, as well as the, can't read that one. Oh, interest groups, any special interest groups would be the last category. So the implementation actions that are coming out of the plan recommending that you more emphasize a road safety culture, look at reconstituting or adjusting the mandate of the existing road safety committee to look at the implementation of this strategy, getting into some sort of countermeasure prioritization. And that would have to come, I think, with more comprehensive data analysis or in terms of your budgetary considerations is what you can move forward with. Again, communication and outreach is an important element, as well as evaluating and monitoring the effectiveness of the measures that you do take. As mentioned earlier by Mr. Bro, there is an initial communication piece that talks about the 5 emphasis areas and encouraging improvements in road safety. We've also factored in a little bit of education about roundabouts and how people should use them, just because that was something that we heard repeatedly, that there needs to be some additional advice for people when they're trying to navigate the roundabouts that are within the municipality. Unless there's any questions about the road safety strategy, just to sort of summarize, the new and updated policies will help the municipality in responding to traffic concerns more consistently. And ultimately, we expect that it will produce safer road environment. We feel that the policies reflect the current state of practice, and we've had the opportunity to inform them through community and stakeholder input. And we feel that the road safety strategy provides an overarching framework for the municipality's ongoing efforts, and that the other 3 policies sort of fit within that overall road safety strategy to encourage safer operation on the municipality's roads. So, Madam Mayor, happy to answer any questions still, or whatever council wishes to proceed.
And I certainly didn't mean to diminish the importance of the framework, because I know everything else sits within it. As you can tell, I was a little bit preoccupied by some of the details of the respective policies. The only comment, and then I'll look to council colleagues, is I'm struck by how, from the respondents that were surveyed or opted in, there is huge support for traffic calming and for automated speed enforcement, right? So, obviously people feel, certainly of those that were surveyed, and I accept that is a bit of a self-selected group, that within North Grenville, those strategies are called for, right? And I think in this agenda somewhere this evening, there is a recommendation from the Police Services Board to reconsider a automated speed enforcement device for a community safety zone based upon some additional information that was brought to the attention of the Police Services Board. So I think there is an appetite for certain strategies, and I'm hopeful that beyond the policies themselves today, we may be looking at some of those other, strategies or elements. Tools at our disposal. So apart from that, I don't really have any questions. Colleagues? I can't see everyone. Okay. So then are we ready to give consideration to a motion? Okay. So the motion proposed this evening is that we receive the presentation, of course. We approve the road safety strategy, which is the most recent document presented. Approve the truck route policy, authorize the introduction of the necessary bylaw, and approve the updated traffic calming policy, speed limit policy. So I think the amendment to this motion is that for the approval of the truck route policy, reconsideration is being given to River Road. So we'd want to make that explicit in the motion. And in terms of traffic calming and the speed limit policy, what I'm hearing is that there may be some capacity for staff to introduce a specific policy to rural roads when it comes to traffic calming in particular. So I think those are the 2 things that we would, obviously direct staff to do in addition to the motion as it was presented this evening. Are we good with that, colleagues? Okay. Clerk, have you captured that appropriately? Do you need clear language?
So that would be to direct staff to return to council to report further concerning the reconsideration of the truck route policy with respect to River Road, and further whether there are any traffic calming measures available in whole or in part within North Grenville's rural areas and any consequential policy amendments required.
I would say based upon the consultant's feedback, can we be fairly definitive about taking River Road off the map? Because if that's the case, I think we should just get it off.
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor, I would.
I'm sorry, it's a county road?
Okay. Okay.
And then we can follow up with
So you're saying it's a county road and because it's an existing truck route? But can't we take it off the recommendations coming to council this evening? Okay. So we could say we lift it from these recommendations, right? And then we have to deal with the counties after the fact. Okay. So approve the truck route policy, right? Save and accept the proposed truck route on River Road.
Your Worship,
Yep.
if I might, I think you may want to give consideration including the reference to the county in the motion.
Okay. Okay. Right. So, but two things are happening here. The consultant has clearly said River Road doesn't need to be included, so we can take it off the recommended truck route policies from your report and pursue discussions with the United Counties, right, for the implementation of that recommendation. Okay. Does that work, Clerk?
From a clarifications perspective, is the intention to pursue a no truck route in that section, or to simply remove the positive signage in that section of roadway?
I think the entire policy was to go with the green versus the red, right? So I think we'd be applying a similar approach to River Road, but not
Correct.
sanctioning it as a truck route.
Definitely.
Should we get the buy-in from the counties, right?
Correct.
Which would be the next step?
Perfect.
Okay. Okay, I'm confident you've captured that, Clerk. Thank you. Okay, can I look for a mover and a seconder, please? Mover over here. Thank you, Councilor Barkley. Seconder over here. Councilor Strachan. Okay, thank you. And I'll call the question unless there's further comment. No? Okay, all in favor, please. Thank you. And that carries. Thank you very much for your indulgence this evening. I appreciate it. And Mr. Bro, I know you've been working on this with Director Dunlop for quite some time. So we appreciate the fulsome presentation this evening. So I think we do have a couple of other pieces of business. One is that we received the resolution from the Police Services Board with respect to automated speed enforcement. There was some direction provided at Police Services Board in regards to re-pursuing a conversation with the United Counties on a pilot program specific to our one community safety zone. Councilor Barkley, would you like to move that?
I don't have the resolution in front of me.
It's that we received the resolution from the Police Services Board. with
Oh,
respect
just
to-
receive it, not
Yeah.
to read it out? Okay, yes?
I'm not sure I have it to be read
I
this
would
evening.
move it. Yeah, if we have it on hand and can be read into the record, I'd appreciate it. Thanks.
I can look to see if I can see it here either.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. And that is the North Grenville Police Services Board recommends to council that they revisit the opportunity to pilot portable photo speed radar in our singular community safety zone, Concession Road, and pursue continued dialogue with the counties and the Grenville OPP.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah, I'd be happy to move that.
Okay.
Thank
I'll
you.
move that then. That's Councillor Barkley, and I need a seconder, please. Councillor Sullivan? Okay. Councillor Strachan, you have a question?
Yes, Madam Mayor, or I guess Councillor Barkley, either one of you, because you're on the Police Services Board. So we will be considering the potential use of an automated speed enforcement system. But we are, in the meantime, we're also making changes to additional hamlets that because it's the limitation right now is on concession, is it not? It doesn't have any wider application beyond concession. So are the changes that we're making right now to be considered in addition to this current motion? I just want to make, I'm just trying to make sure I understand where this is going.
No, I think that's a great question. I think I can reflect
Yeah,
the PSB
yeah,
conversation.
this kind of device can only be used in community safety zones, and concession is our only community safety zone. So it would only apply to concession until such time as we created another community safety zone somewhere.
So the gateway signage or anything like that in the hamlets, it wouldn't apply to those areas because they're not considered community safety zones,
No,
correctly?
no.
Correct?
Yeah.
I believe it's also specific to the provincial legislation, which enables the use of these enforcement tools in certain areas over others, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, they're limited to, as you mentioned, the community safety zones as well as school zones. So we do have the ability to designate other areas as those zones, but currently the only one we have right now is concession, except for the county roads.
What is on Clothier if it's not a community safety zone? What is in front of the schools?
The school zone, I believe.
It's a
however,
school
that
zone.
is a county road.
Okay,
That section of Clothier Street.
I see. So we would be assuming jurisdiction for our municipal community safety zone, which is on concession.
Concession Road would be our jurisdiction,
Yes.
and Clothier Street would be their jurisdiction.
Their jurisdiction. So that's why the focus, I guess, at the PSB, we focused on the municipality's community safety zone, which is on
Yeah,
concession.
what we could do. Yeah.
Okay.
So the school zones that we do have are all on, I guess they're all on county roads, right? Okay, sorry. All right, so there's that. And then the question, because I'm looking through the details regarding these automated systems, they're quite expensive. And so is part of what we're going to be reconsidering, or staff's going to be reconsidering, is whether or not the cost benefit actually is worthwhile for concession, given it's the only area? Are we revisiting that aspect of it as well?
I don't think we're asking that it be adopted, but that staff, right, give consideration to whether or not we could affordably pilot one.
Right.
It is still subject to some significant negotiation with the United Counties on provincial offenses, but there are some possibilities if we were potentially looking at one. I know, do you want to? I just need some clarification. Okay, go ahead, Mr. Dyke.
Rishba, as I understand it, the motion is you're receiving the motion,
Yes.
but are you also giving us direction to pursue the motion?
I think that was the intention.
Okay. Okay. Did you have a timeline you want us to report back?
I think that we were thinking certainly as part of the budget 2022 process.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you. Can that be in the motion,
Yes,
please?
I appreciate that.
Thank you.
So the motion as prepared says council receives the resolution from the PSB, but I think
And that,
subsequent to that,
if I might, and that the matter be referred to the 2020 budget deliberations
Excellent.
for consideration.
okay. Does that?
Yes,
And the
thank you.
matter be referred to the 2022.
Sorry, I'm going back to 2022.
Gary thought these days were over.
2020 so much, I thought I'd go back to it. So
No,
it's a little punchy. It's only like does everybody want to order breakfast?
I'd be happy to accept that as a friendly amendment.
Thank you. Don't raise the issue of friendly amendments at this hour. So council receives the resolution and that the matter be referred to the 2022 budget deliberation process. Poor Mr. Dyke, he thought he had really brought great rigor and efficiency to these meetings, and here we are at 10:08.
I apologize to council. I forgot we were taping our.
It's all good. It's a late hour, but Director Dunlop knows how much later these meetings used to go, so just a little flash from the past. Okay, so I've got a motion moved by Councillor Barclay and seconded by Councillor Sullivan. We have the amendment. Can I call the question? Okay, good. Thank you. All right. Okay. We do have a notice of motion here. This, of course, emerged from Councillor Barclay in our last meeting, and this was to direct staff to explore the viability of rehabilitating the Township Hall, including but not limited to an arts hub concept and funding opportunities available. Councillor Barclay, can we direct staff to consider these options as part of the budget 2022 process?
Yeah, sure, that could be
Okay.
added to
Okay.
my
Mr.
motion.
Dyke, does that work from your perspective?
That's the preferred method, Your
Okay.
Worship.
Okay, so again, we are directing staff to explore the viability of rehabilitating Township Hall. And I think we can say, yes, I know, don't remember that wording. And the matter be referred to the 2022 budget deliberations. Is that comfortable for you, Councillor Barclay?
Yeah, that's great, thank you.
Great, okay. And then I will have you move that once again?
Oh, yeah, it's my motion, so
Okay.
we'd be looking for a seconder.
Okay, seconder, please, over here. Councillor O'Sullivan, thank you. I think Deputy Mayor has asked if we can potentially lower the screen so I can see the people. Did you ask that question? I don't know if there's some technical adjustments we can make. It is very difficult to see Councillor O'Sullivan in particular. So thank you, Councillor O'Sullivan. No, none. All right, I will call the question then. All in favor, colleagues? Good, thank you. I apologize, Councillor O'Sullivan, that I'm not able to see you clearly. It's 3 screens. I have to look through 3 screens. So. Great screens. Fantastic. It's just sight lines. Okay. Or maybe you can just give me a higher chair, clerk. Maybe that'll do it. Okay. Okay, so we are on our last 2 motions. I believe we've addressed all the business this evening. Ms. Babcock-Cormier, did you want us to approve dates for council meetings, or are we going to do that at the next meeting?
It's done by consent agenda.
Oh, we did it by consent agenda. Okay. So then we are at our confirmation bylaw. I'll look over here again. Would you, thank you, Councillor Strakian. Over here, Deputy Mayor, thank you. Bylaw 12121 to confirm the proceedings of council. Don't know how we couldn't. It's a painstaking but very informative meeting. I'll call the question on confirmation, please. All in favor? Good. And then finally, adjournment at the hour of 10:12. I'll look for Councillor Sullivan, Councillor Barkley. Regular meeting of council adjourn at 10:12. Oh, I apologize, however, I did not ask if we had received any comments from members of the community or the media.
So we haven't, Your Worship.
Okay, we have not.
You're okay.
I apologize. I was just whipping through these motions. So then I'm good then
You're
to
okay.
call the motion on adjournment? Okay. So the regular meeting of council adjourned at 10:12 p.m. Colleagues, all in favor?